Good afternoon. It's great to have all of you here tonight. What a great packed house. I'll ask Councilmember Bolden to open us with a prayer.
Let's bow a moment for prayer. Heavenly Father, we come to you today asking for your guidance, wisdom, and support as we begin this meeting. Help us to engage in meaningful discussion, allow us to grow closer as a group, and nurture the bonds. Father, thank you for our mayor, the city council, and leaders at every level in our city. Give them wisdom so that they may solve problems, grace to distinguish between right and wrong, so they can bring stability and prosperity to our community. Father, we ask you to bring a spirit of harmony and a spirit of cooperation among the staff members and elected leaders. Father, give our leaders, our staff, and our citizens the clarity to know what issues are most important so we can dedicate our time towards them. Father, we ask that you give us sound counsel and good judgment to help us make good decisions. May you also give us greater knowledge and understanding so that we may live skillfully and give back to what is good and excellent to our community. May your wisdom produce in us creative ideas, solutions to the problems of our city. Lord, give your people in our community a spirit of unity as we follow you, so that one heart and one mind we may work together for the good of our city and glorify your name. May our community be known for its justice. Let it always prosper from the influence of good men and women. Father, we pray for those that have been affected by the flooding. We ask that you comfort and give them strength. Give them the endurance and resilience and compassion that they need. We pray for those who are providing support to those affected by the flooding, the government, the emergency service, faith leaders, and for their neighbors, families, and friends. Heavenly Father, we ask for all of this in your precious name. Amen.
Amen. Call this meeting to order, and if you'll rise for the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. No one has signed up for open forum, so we will move into the election and canvass results for the May 6, 2023 City Council regular election and consider adopting a resolution declaring the results.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Jan Vinson, City Secretary. So tonight we're going to canvass the results. In front of you, I gave you a copy of the canvass report from the Nacogdoches County Elections Office. And so what I will need to do is read through that for the record. So the first I have is the Northeast Ward. Kathleen Bellinger received 628 votes. Rick Herzog received 104 votes. That is a total of 733 who voted out of 5,420. The next one is for Northwest Ward. It should be your second page there laying in front of you. Brad Mall received 328 votes. Ann Keenan received 169 votes. Total votes were 498 out of 4,073 voters. Also, I left for you 3 more pages, which are just the precinct result report for both the Northeast Ward and the Northwest Ward, which I don't actually have to read those in. I'm sorry, I forgot to flip through my PowerPoint. Can look at that real quick. I get really nervous doing this, so I did forget that. And then Brad Mall's and Ann Keenan for Northwest Ward results. So you can look over what I gave you. If you have any questions, I will be happy to answer the questions. If you are in agreement with the results that are there in front of you on the report, then we will need to consider adopting a resolution declaring those results.
Mr. Mayor, I would like to make a motion that we adopt the draft resolution and canvass the results of the May 6, 2023 City Council regular election.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second. Okay, any discussion? Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Okay, we'll move to B, administer statement of officer and oath of office for newly elected council members.
Okay, the one thing I would like to remind you is that we did do an ordinance electing Randy Johnson as mayor since he ran unopposed, and we did that back on the March 7th city council meeting. I failed to state that. I have to get my notes so I don't forget what to say. Okay, so what we have to do is we have to do the statement of officer for each council member and the mayor, and then, and we will do the oath of office. I will do them together. I will do first the statement and then the oath, and then we'll be seated at the dais. So I'd like to start with Councilmember Bellinger. You can come down here with me, I'm sorry. Okay, Councilmember Bellinger, if you will raise your right hand, we'll do the statement of officer first, and if you'll just repeat after me.
Okay.
I, Kathleen Bellinger,
I, Kathleen Bellinger,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I have not
that I have not
directly or indirectly paid,
directly or indirectly paid,
offered or promised to pay,
offered or promised to pay,
contributed or promised to contribute
contributed or promised to contribute
any money or things of value,
any money or things of value,
or promised any public office
or promised any public office
or employment
or employment
for the giving or withholding
for the giving or withholding
of a vote
of a vote
at the election
at the election
at which I was elected,
at which I was elected,
or as a reward
or as a reward
to secure my appointment
to secure my appointment
or confirmation,
or confirmation,
whichever the case may be.
whichever the case may be.
So help me God.
So help me God.
And this title to which you were elected is a Northeast Ward Council member. And if you'll just sign this for me, right there. It's a lot of words, isn't it?
It is.
This next one's much shorter. Thank you, ma'am. Okay.
Another one?
Oath of office. Okay,
Okay.
raise your right hand. I, Kathleen Bellinger,
I, Kathleen Bellinger,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully execute
that I will faithfully execute
the duties of the office
the duties of the office
of City Council Member,
of City Council Member,
Northeast Ward
Northeast Ward
of the State of Texas,
of the State of Texas,
and will to the best of my ability
and will to the best of my ability
preserve,
preserve,
protect,
protect,
and defend
and defend
the Constitution
the Constitution
and laws
and laws
of the United States
of the United States
and of this state.
and of this state.
So help me God.
So help me God.
And sign that one right there. Congratulations. You can take your spot. All right, Mr. Mall? Let me get these out of the way so we're not signing on top of Ms. Bellinger. Okay, we will also start with the statement. Raise your right hand. And this is a long one.
I need a rehearsal.
You may need to. Take one. I, Brad Mall,
I, Brad Mall,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I have not directly or indirectly
that I have not directly or indirectly
paid, offered, or promised
paid, offered, or promised
to pay,
to pay,
contribute,
contribute,
or promise to contribute
or promise to contribute
any money or things of value,
any money or things of value,
or promised any public office
or promise any public office
or employment
or employment
for the giving or withholding
for the giving or withholding
of a vote
of a vote
at the election
at the election
at which I was elected,
at which I was elected
or as a reward
as a reward
to secure my
to secure my
appointment or confirmation,
appointment or confirmation,
whichever the case may be.
whichever the case may be.
So help me God.
So help me God.
And this is for the city council member for the Northwest Ward. If you will just sign right there.
Thank you.
And then next is the oath of office, which is much shorter. I may need to
Praise
practice.
the Lord.
I, Brad Mall,
I, Brad Mall,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully execute the duties
that I will faithfully execute the duties
of the office of city council member,
of the office of City Council,
Northwest Ward
Northwest Ward
of the state of Texas,
of the State of Texas,
and will, to the best of my ability,
and will, to the best of my ability,
preserve,
preserve,
protect,
protect,
and defend
and defend
the Constitution
the Constitution
and laws of the United States
and laws of the United States
and of this state,
and of this state.
so help me God.
So help me God.
All right, right there. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Congratulations, and you can
Appreciate
take your seat up here.
Oh. Thank you, Jim.
All right, Mr. Johnson.
No.
And I don't know if you want her to hold that. Okay, raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Randy Johnson,
I, Randy Johnson,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I have not directly or indirectly
that I have not directly or indirectly
paid, offered, or promised to pay,
paid, offered, or promised to pay,
contribute, or promised to contribute
contribute, or promised to contribute
any money or things of value,
any money or things of value,
or promise any public office
or promised any public office
or employment
or employment
for the giving or withholding
for the giving or withholding
of a vote at the election
of a vote at the election
at which I was elected,
as which I was elected,
or as a reward
or as a reward
to secure my appointment
to secure my appointment
or confirmation,
or confirmation,
whichever the case may be,
whichever the case may be.
so help me God.
So help me
And
God.
this is for the title of mayor. If you could just sign that right there for me. And last one is oath of office. Are you ready?
Yeah. ready.
I, Randy Johnson,
I, Randy Johnson,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully execute
that I will faithfully execute
the duties of the office
the duties of the office
of mayor
of mayor
of the state of Texas,
of the state of Texas,
and will, to the best of my ability,
and will to the best of my ability
preserve,
preserve,
protect, and defend the
the
Constitution
Constitution
and laws
and laws
of the United States
of the United States
and of this state.
and of this state.
So help me God.
So help me God.
All right. Right there.
Thank you very much.
And we have one thing, a couple of things for you, Mayor Mize,
You
to,
want me to sit down or you want
as,
to stay?
no, because I'm gonna get you to read this.
Okay.
Just don't hit him with the gavel.
We'll get back.
Just for your service here with the city. So if you could just read that for him, please.
Debbie, I want to thank you very much for your service. It's hard. It's a very, very difficult job. People don't understand what you and your wife have to go through, but you dedicated yourself to this city for the last 3 years, and I'm very, very proud of you. Thank you. I hope I can do the same to you, sir. This is the proclamation. Whereas Mayor Jimmy Mize has devoted his time and effort toward making the city of Nacogdoches a better place to live and work, and whereas through his dedication to the betterment of the community, he has earned the admiration and respect from the people with whom he has come into contact and the citizens he has served. Whereas Jimmy Mize has faithfully served the community as mayor of the city of Nacogdoches from May 2021 to May 2023, and whereas the performance of his duties and responsibilities as a member of the Nacogdoches City Council has been characterized by excellent, constructive contributions to local government and the community. Now therefore, be it proclaimed that I, Randy Johnson, Mayor of the City of Nacogdoches, and on behalf of the City Council, do hereby recognize and extend our heartfelt appreciation.
presented to Jimmy Mize for outstanding service to the citizens of Nacogdoches, Texas, mayor, and it has the years of his service with the city, the key to the city.
Key to the city. Thank you. All right. We'll get you. Well, I just want to say thank you. It's been an honor to serve the city of Nacogdoches. There's been some really good times and some that are a little more struggle, but that's what's ahead for us. So we're going to work through those things. We've got a wonderful city staff. We've got a great interim manager. Look forward to the changes that come about, the things that we grow. Certainly all the department heads. Thank you for your support, Steve, Larissa. I mean, all of you. Elena, it's been a great time, and I couldn't do it without your support. I thought about something I was going to say. I think being on the council is a little bit like marriage. I had a preacher once, Dr. Alan Reed, that described marriage as a screen door and flies. He said those on the inside, those flies on the inside, want out, and those on the outside want in. So I'll leave you with that. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you everyone for coming, and it is time to go to work. Got a lot to do tonight. First item on the agenda is the items to be removed from the consent agenda. If anybody wants to remove any items on the consent agenda, I think there's 5 items, so.
Mayor, I'd like to remove item C from the consent agenda, please.
Okay. Item C.
And I will make a motion to adopt the balance of the consent agenda.
Second?
Okay, we have a motion to second to adopt the consent agenda with the exception of item C. And we'll open that up for discussion now.
Shouldn't we go ahead and vote for those?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Give you a little bit. It'd take me a little while to get used to this, so. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Just give us a brief overview where, what we're doing, where the funding is coming from, et cetera. Just briefly.
So briefly, the Ritchie Street Playground was installed last year. We did the playground first, knowing that the parking lot was going to have to be expanded, but we wanted to get the playground in, and then we were going to do the parking lot, and then we have a donor for the fence. So these are budgeted funds. We have approximately $150,000 for park paving, and so this would expend $114,444 of that $150,000 that is budgeted.
Those are my only questions. Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions or discussion? Okay.
I make a motion that we approve consent agenda item 6C as presented.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, we have a motion and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next item, we'll start on the regular agenda. And the first item on the agenda is to consider approval of a resolution declaring a local state of disaster due to flooding on May the 11th, 2023.
Evening, Mayor and Council. Steve Bartlett, Director of Public Works and City Engineer. So as I know you're aware, we had some terrific rains on last Thursday. And in the middle of all that, we moved forward with declaring that as a local disaster. Mayor Mize at the time signed that declaration. And so this is typically an actual resolution that basically authorizes that, because we did that on the fly. So very quickly, it's really just a formal statement when we do a disaster declaration locally. It's just a formal statement by whoever the chief public official is, in this case, the mayor, that we have an emergency situation that may exceed our ability to do responses. Interestingly, what that really gives us the ability to do is to exercise emergency power to preserve life or property, public health. It gives us the ability to order evacuations when we might not have that, including on private property. We can control access to certain areas, including private property that may be a hazard, or close a street. We can temporarily suspend certain regulations and deadlines. And also for us, declaring a disaster is an emergency declaration for purchasing purposes. So if we needed to get a contractor in, we wouldn't have to go through a bid process. We can negotiate and take care of an emergency. So, and certainly what all of you are familiar with is it also can sometimes be a footprint to allow us to request assistance, federal and state assistance for funds. So we don't know yet where that sits. We're just doing damage assessments now, but we wanted to get that out. You have to do that very early. So all this was about a declaration early to give us those powers. We're asking you to now bless that declaration in the form of a resolution, and we'll keep you posted as we find out if monies are available and what other things this gives. I will tell you, there's actually no harm in doing the declaration, so there's no downside to doing it, even if we don't utilize it for anything else. And I'll be happy to answer any questions after public comment, Mayor.
Okay, I'll open it up to public comment from the audience. There being none, discussion among the council, please. If none, I'll accept the motion.
I'll move to bless this and approve the resolution declaring the local state of disaster due to flooding on May 11th, 2023.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is to receive a report from the auditors regarding the annual comprehensive financial report for fiscal year ending September 30th, 2022. That'd be Ms. Carbo.
Well, not Mayor, Council, Pam Carbo, Director of Finance. I'm actually just going to introduce you to Clayton Rogers, CPA, who is very instrumental in the preparation of the audit, and he will be presenting that to you tonight. So, Clayton?
Thank you, Pam. Thank you all for having me. So we get to roll our sleeves up and go right into the fun stuff. Talk about some numbers. As Pam said, I'm a CPA with Patilla Brown and Hill, your outside audit firm, and we are at the end of the fiscal year 22 audit, and so I'm here to talk to you about the results of that audit, go over the financial statements that you should all have a copy of, and answer any questions that you might have about the financials, the audit process, so on and so forth. I will say this document is 120 pages. I'm not going to cover all of them. I don't think y'all like to sit here all night for that. However, there is a lot to go through, and I'd like to at least hit a couple of the high points and talk a little bit about what the audit is, what it's not, and those types of things. So in your annual comprehensive financial reports, if you'll start with me on page Roman numeral 5, I'll point out the term comprehensive because in the realm of governmental financial reports, the annual comprehensive financial report that the city puts out is above and beyond. I point that out. Here on page 5, we have the Government Finance Officers Association Certificate of Achievement that was presented to this report last year. I think that was 13 years in a row that the city has gotten that. And to get that award, basically this document has to not only have a bunch of extra information that GAAP doesn't require, it also essentially gets sent off and spun around the country to some volunteers like myself who really pick nits with it. And so while the purpose of our audit is materially correct, they're looking for all of the little I's dotted and the T's crossed. And so I think what that speaks to is the quality of information that staff has available and that they're putting out there for you, the council, to use, for citizens, for granting agencies, what have you. And with that, before I go any further, I would like to thank Pam and her staff, and really everybody at the city that we worked with. I'm here to tell you that government finance has not gotten any easier. There was a new lease standard this year that required sometimes digging up and evaluating contracts that may or may not even be in written form anymore because they were decades old. Booking new journal entries and putting new stuff in the financial statements that's never been required before. It's very time consuming. There's a lot that goes into that. They're adding new regulations all the time, but Pam and her staff were very forthcoming and very helpful to get us this audit to you in good shape. Although I feel like I may have spoiled things a little bit. If you'll flip forward with me to page 1. If you were here with me last year, you compared this year's report to last year, the report looks a little different. That's not anything y'all did. That's a industry-wide thing. And they took away all the suspense, and now on the very, very first paragraph, in the second paragraph, it shows that we're able to render an unmodified opinion on the financial statements. If you hear the term clean opinion, that's the same thing. And so what it means is that based on our audit, in our opinion, these financial statements are materially correct. That there's nothing in accordance with accounting principles that is incorrect or omitted that would affect the decision-making of the people who have a stake in this. Both yourselves, citizens, granting agencies, probably most importantly, above all, your bondholders. They're looking very closely at this financial information to make sure that there are not surprises or that there aren't issues with bond covenants, that sort of thing. So what is the audit? Audit can spark up a lot of different images in the head about what that is. It could be the IRS, it could be dudes in black windbreaker jackets storming in and taking control of the cash drawer. Really what we're trying to do, as I mentioned, is render an opinion on the financial statements. And what we're going for as part of the audit is what we call reasonable assurance. And so here on the second page, on page 2 at the top, it talks a little bit about the auditor's responsibilities in the audit. And I'd like to point out that reasonable assurance is not absolute. We don't look at every dollar. We don't look at every transaction. That would cost way too much money and staff would pull their hair out having us here all year. But that it is a very high level of assurance. So for example, probably the number a lot of people care about the most might be cash. So as an audit procedure, for example, we confirm a lot of those cash and bank amounts, not just looking at the documents that the city has internally, but actually confirming that externally. We have information we can get from the Texas Comptroller's Office about payments that were made to the city. And then we do various test procedures, analytical procedures, what have you, to pile up that body of evidence that supports our audit so that it's not absolute. There are limitations to the audit process, but that it makes us pretty comfortable that these financial statements are materially correct. Of course, management is responsible for these financial statements and everything that's in them, even though we did help prepare them, as is very, very custom in the government world. And ultimately, we were at the end of the audit process able to render an unmodified opinion. So, I'd like to very, very briefly, there's a little bit more audit-related information in the back I'll touch on. I'd like to skip over just a few sections of the financials, and at the end, if you have specific questions or things you'd like to dig into, we can jump back into that, if that works for you. So, immediately after the independent auditor's report is the management's discussion and analysis. If you were going to start in one place in this report, that's probably a good place to do it. It talks very bird's eye view, very high level, very summarized. And it's not just talking about what the financial statements look like, but also putting them in context, primarily with comparing to the prior year. If revenues went up or down or expenses went up or down, there's generally a lot more discussion here discussing what some of the reasons for those changes might be. Going past that to starting on page 12. We have the basic financial statements. And this very first financial statement, really the first two, are what we call the city-wide financial statements or the government-wide financial statements. And I'd like to point out with those, if you take only one thing away from us talking about the financials, it's that generally speaking, I would say that there's nothing that professionally speaking we would consider to be a surprise. As far as what fund balance did, where revenues shook out, how things compared to the budget, there was really nothing results-wise that was different from what you might have had reported to you or what you might have expected. In other words, a lot of, say, the adjustments that happen during the audit process are in these first two government-wide statements. And the adjustments that happen during the audit process primarily are things that by a matter of practice only get reported once a year. For example, some actuarial information related to TMRS, capital assets, long-term debt, that really only ever gets captured in this particular set of financial statements. But beyond that, you'll have the governmental fund and proprietary fund financials. And again, fund balance is doing exactly what was expected to. General fund ended, I think, right around 5 months of fund balance. All the things that, again, the audit process did not significantly change where we thought we were going to wind up. Behind the basic financials are the notes to the financial statements, which pretty much any number or any category of transactions that are in the financials, you can get a lot more information in them in sometimes painstaking detail. Beyond that, we have some combining and individual statements that take certain aggregated information and breaks it out either year by year or certain funds showing budget schedules and that sort of thing. And lastly, starting on pages 79 and 80, if you'll flip right before that to the cover page that says statistical section, I won't go over this in any detail. This section right here, when we have an annual comprehensive financial report, if the city did not go to all the extra effort, if staff didn't gather all of this information to get that award, none of this would be here. This is not required by GAAP. In fact, it's not audited specifically, but that this presents a lot of year-over-year or 10-year comparative information that can be pretty useful and pretty interesting to look at, but that is something that city staff puts together to help put this report in context. Last up, if you'll jump back with me to page 112. So a couple more fun audit letters. Since we're dealing with taxpayer funds, we're operating under a set of standards put out by the federal government called government auditing standards. And it's just like regular auditing standards, and we follow those too. But it puts on some extra requirements about mainly our ethics requirements, as well as certain things that we would have to look at. Specifically, it talks about internal control over financial reporting, that first bullet. Basically, they don't want, with a government, they don't want correct financials by accident. So that if in the course of our audit we had found significant problems with internal control, or especially with how the numbers fed into this point, if there was a really big problem with the checks and balances that got us here, that'd be something we'd be required to report to you. Similarly, on the next page, at the top of page 113, there's a section talking about the report on compliance. And again, I mentioned that we're talking about what's material and what affects the financial statements. But we did look at compliance with certain laws, regulations, and contractual agreements. I would say probably the single biggest one I could think of would be your debt service tax rate, that portion of property taxes that are levied for debt service. We're looking at some reports and making sure that that piece that's supposed to be spent on that winds up in the debt service fund. That's an example of a significant law or regulation that affects the financials. So if we had found significant non-compliance, significant control problems, we would be reporting it here. However, I'm happy to say that as a result of our audit, we did not have any reportable findings. Last up, on page 114, there's one more report that we have in this document. And I'll try and keep this pretty brief and high level. There's a lot that feeds into this. We actually don't just do one audit here. We also do a second audit, which ironically is called the single audit. The short version, when the city spends more than a certain dollar amount of federal funds every year, federal law requires that we do a deep dive on certain federal grant programs that the city has spent, because the federal government doesn't ever give you money for free. They attach all sorts of strings. And so we don't look at every string that's attached. We're again using materiality and going off what the granting agencies would really care about. But we pick a certain program and do a deep dive in that program about those compliance requirements and do an audit to render an opinion, again, just like the financial statements, render that opinion on compliance. Top of page 114 here, you can see that we also rendered an unmodified opinion on the financial state, or on the compliance with the Single Audit Act. So as far as the audit process goes, opinion over the financial statements, clean opinion, no findings, as good as it gets. Opinion on the single audit with compliance, clean opinion, no findings, as good as it gets. Last up, as I close, and then I'll open up for whatever questions y'all have. There's an attached letter here that is our letter to you as the city council. And I just want to point out one thing that kind of leapt out this year. Really, this reiterates a lot of those things I talked about, our responsibilities, what stuff that we would have to report to you if we had found problems. But there is something new here we've gotten a lot of questions on. That's on page 2. It talks about significant risks in the audit process. And we've gotten a lot of questions this year. You know, people see significant risk, fraud risk, that first bullet point, management override. What's the deal here? And all I'll say about it is that these risks, this is not a new thing to the city of Nacogdoches. This is a new disclosure. So if this kind of left off the page that we're considering a significant fraud risk, that first bullet point there is actually an assumed risk to all audits of any entity anywhere, whether it's the city of Nacogdoches, the city of Houston, Amazon, whatever audit we're dealing with. That's a presumed risk that we have to address. But talking about risks, obviously, just because a risk is there doesn't mean anything is wrong. And again, this is a beginning of the audit, sight unseen type of thing, and is not an indication that there were any findings related to those items. So just wanted to point that out because that has gotten a lot of attention this year as a new thing that we have to disclose to y'all. But the rest of the letter is very, very boilerplate from our perspective. So obviously, again, I'd like to thank you all for taking an interest in the city's finances, as well as supporting city staff in making sure that this document gets put out and sent off as correct as it can be. And I'd be happy to go over any questions that y'all might have about the financials or the audit process. Or if we don't want to hear about any more numbers.
You want input from this audience first? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, if there's any input from the audience, if they want to speak, you can come forward and state your name. Okay. There being none, go ahead, Chad.
So I was not here last year when we did the audit. I think it was done in April, if I remember correctly. As a person that's sitting on this side of the desk and responsible for what the city does financially, what things should we be concerned as elected officials? I know you've got no significant or material findings, but what are the things that we need to look out for as we move forward, as we're considering significant capital needs? How do we better understand the financials to be able to make better informed decisions from your perspective?
That's a great question, and I have a book back sitting on my desk somewhere that was written a while back. They have written actual guides to government finance for elected officials. There are guides, trainings, all sorts of things out there. But to me, I think the first thing is doing what you just did, which is taking an interest in it. Because this is a thick document. If you're not an accountant like I am, it's kind of hard to get through. Sometimes there's a lot of jargon and technical detail. I would say the first thing, to me, again, talking in very general terms, is paying attention to not just how things are looking at a given point in time, but considering the trends and considering really whatever information staff is presenting as far as, okay, what's the other side of this? And making sure that council's staying open to all potential options. And really, I think that's the single biggest thing is reading it, taking an interest in it, asking honest questions if there are things that stick out or don't look right. And then just asking those questions about especially the capital spending or those types of more long-term decisions, because this is just a flashpoint in time, but stopping to think about, okay, what's this action that's going to potentially affect us, not just for the budget for this next year, but what trajectory is that gonna set us on going forward?
If y'all are okay with me continuing, I have just a couple more.
Sure.
So thinking from this perspective, that's good information to be able to dive deeper into the financials. On the other side, this is a 120-page document that has every financial report and where we are at fiscal year end, September 30th, 2022. How does a member of the public, a resident of our city, pick up this document and say, where is our city today? What are some very specific places in this document that someone can look and say, we're in good financial shape or we're not?
That's a great question. So I could jump to a bunch of different examples here. But one particular piece of analysis that's probably I would say maybe Government Finance 101, if you'll jump with me to page 15. The question we get asked most often when I stand in front of a governing body is, well, how are we doing? How much fund balance do we have? And while my audit opinion is not on how good a financial shape you're in, we can speak to a couple of things that people will look at to kind of inform that decision as to, are we in good shape? So here on page 15 is our balance sheet for your governmental funds. Most important fund probably in all of the city is the general fund. You can see at the very bottom, unassigned fund balance, about $12.5 million. And if you'll stick a finger on this page, flip one over to the income statement, and we see total expenditures for the general fund, about $29.3 million, middle left side of the page. So that's the very first thing that a lot of people will look at is how much unassigned fund balance in the general fund, how many days of expenditures is that? And fortunately, I did the math before we got here. It's about 5.1 months, if I remember, which is about 5 months in reserves, which is a very healthy place to be at. The GFOA recommends no less than 2 to 3, and certainly that a little bit more, 4 to 5 to even 6 months is a very good place to be at. So that's one of the first things. Back in that statistical section, you can even see that over time, and start asking those questions that, okay, are we in good shape now? Are we amassing a lot of fund balance, or is it decreasing? Some of those types of things.
That's all I have for now. I'm sure someone else will spark my interest.
I've got one question. If we don't have much debt as far as our bonds, right? It's a little over $1 million, $1.3 million. Okay, what is our bond rating, Pam? Do you know?
We have water and sewer, and I think when we went through for the COs, was it at, was it 8.3 or 8? Which one it was? Standard Poor's does one, and we do one under Moody's.
Right.
I can't remember which one we did this past year. We didn't complete that process because of the CO, so.
Right. Could we take this document to Moody's and Standard and Poor's, and this would be what they want?
Oh, we do.
Okay.
This is what,
Right.
when we went through that process, this
Okay.
is exactly what they look at.
Okay, all right. And I've been to both of those reporting agencies in New York, and is there a possibility, based on the information that you've seen here, that we could get our rating increased?
It's possible. I wouldn't go talking off the cuff about it because I didn't look at these financials in light of that specific criteria. But I will say it's certainly something that if the city's position continues to improve, that's definitely something that they'll be looking at. Again, Pam could speak to in a lot more detail to the actual nuts and bolts process of the bond ratings calls, but that.
Yeah, there are, and being with the school board, there are so many pieces that go into that rating. This being one of them, We went through it again, like I said, for the potential CO last year, and it was not increased. I mean, they look at staff turnover. They look and say, how long has your mayor been here? How long has your finance director been here? How long has your city manager been here? And so there are all kinds of things that they look at that they take into account. So as some of those things that have happened here, when we go through that process again, not necessarily gonna hurt us, but we probably will not increase at this point, just because we've had a lot of that turnover in some of those areas. And so as we proceed through the next year or two and look at potential bond issuances, I wouldn't think that we would go up, but we're definitely not gonna be going down, I think, based on where we stand financially. I don't think there's any reason, nothing, because they look at what's going on in the school, they look at SFA, they were very interested in SFA going into the UT system. That was a big plus for us, and so they look at all kinds of outside factors.
Right.
And so I don't anticipate us going down. I'm just not sure that we are to that point with all the external things that they look at, that we are, they look at growth, they look at new property value growth, they look at all of that stuff. And so until all of those pieces kind of start getting, we're building our reserves and doing some things, but there's a lot of pieces to that. At some point, yes, I hope we get there, but I don't think we'll go up, not within the next cycle of being reviewed.
One more question. You or your firm has done a lot of these, right?
We do.
Okay. Based on your experience, this city, how would you think that it would be rated as far as you're concerned? Average, above average, below average?
I would definitely say, to me, just the fact that the city is issuing this document with a lot of the extra information, with the attention not just to getting it materially right, but even more right, I think that's an indication of a level of attention to financial condition that indicates at least above average. I would say that the 5 months in the general fund is right very much in the realm of being what we see from cities y'all's size that are in a healthy place, and certainly the net position in the water sewer fund that's accumulated is very, very above average.
Okay, thank you. That's all the question I have. Mr. Bolden?
Yeah, one question. Mentioned information in this package could provide a bond rating, correct? Is enough information in this to, say, give approximately the debt capacity over the next few years for projects we want to commit to?
So looking forward is, I'll try and answer that in two parts. I think looking forward is kind of a different question. I would have to go and grab my crystal ball out of the car as far as what property values are due and where the tax rate's going to go at. I can say that they do have some handy information back in the stat section. Let's see if I can find it on the spot. So a couple of the things, if you'll jump back to about page 100, it never, the statistical section never specifically addresses the question of exactly how much debt could we issue, because there are even some arguments I've seen in the accounting circles as to which requirements are rules of thumb versus which are actually legally binding debt margins. But that here we can see several of these schedules talk year over year over time as far as the amounts of debt that have been outstanding. For example, on page 100, you can see that total bonded debt's basically half of what it was 10 years ago. And that probably if we looked at some other data, we would see that property tax revenues have increased over that time, as well as one of the things that your bonding agencies, I think, probably will pay some attention to. One page over to page 102. In some instances, it's not necessarily that there's a limit on the amount of water revenue that's pledged to repay utility debt. But in any event, what this schedule is doing is comparing basically how much net utility revenue do we have versus how much was debt service. What the schedule's trying to show is that the city's utilities are generating enough revenue to pay its debt service over time. And you can see that net available revenue, right there in the middle, has always been a much, much larger number than the debt service annually, and that ratio has just gone up over time.
If I had left off the future 2 or 3 years down the line, but as of today, would you have answered that question different?
Not exactly. I think it's something that we could probably pull out and make maybe a rough estimate of what a debt margin might be, but that's certainly something that wouldn't be difficult for to be put together.
You mentioned pages 79 and 80, net position by component. Would it have made a difference on our outlook to others if we didn't provide that information?
I think so. It's certainly something that I think provides some really useful context. I don't know to what extent necessarily maybe the rating or bonding agencies really are hinging their all of their metrics off of this non-required information. So I suspect that as much as the financial services industry influences accounting standards, if they were dying for this, they would make everybody put it in there. But that certainly, we've fielded some questions in the past that would indicate that it definitely is probably something that's not completely ignored.
Thank you. I'm good, Mayor.
If I remember last year, you talked about the transfer of funds from the high amount of transfer of funds from the utility into the general fund. Do you have any comments about that right now?
Not specifically, other than I would, not having seen last year just off the top of my head, we can see that in the MD&A where we have some year-over-year comparative information. Page 7. About the middle of page 7, we have a comparative income statement. These are those government-wide financials. And that transfers toward the bottom of that schedule. You can see 5.8, almost 5.9 versus 5.6 in the prior year. And of course, the important context with that's not shown here is how much is that versus what was budgeted. But that, off the top of my head, I don't remember seeing any significant budgetary variances with that.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions or discussions?
I do have one based on Councilmember Bolden's discussion on page 79 and 80. Can you discuss with us the components that go together in the various net positions? And because I know that it's not true that we have $170 million, but what actually comes together to add to that number? And what does it mean for us?
Great question. So we have 2 categories, governmental and business type activities, and we've got a total of the 2. Business type activities is more your water, sewer, sanitation, and airport fuel funds, basically regurgitated from the front. However, governmental activities is what I talked about earlier with some of this only gets adjusted once a year because your governmental funds don't report a lot of that long-term stuff. So that there are some differences between if you looked at, say, fund balances from monthly financial reporting to how that links up in here. There's a number of different things that feed into that. However, this schedule in particular, we show 3 categories. Net investment and capital assets is basically what is the carrying value of your capital assets less debt. The reason the governmental side breaks that out is because on the for-profit side, components of equity are more geared toward how much equity was generated from operations versus how much was generated from owner investment. Well, obviously that metric doesn't really work here. So that net investment in capital assets, in theory, is a part of the net position that the city's not going to be able to use to pay the bills in the future. That you don't generally, in a lot of cases, generally speaking, buy capital assets to make revenue. It's more for a provision of service, generally speaking. So that then we remove that out and we're going to split out restricted and unrestricted. The difference between those, restricted means an external restriction. So whereas, for example, a lot of the unrestricted net position in the utility funds, management's got a plan for that. You know, y'all look at the capital improvements plan, those dollar amounts have a name for them for how that's gonna be spent. But that's not an external restriction, so whatever is shown in restricted is, bond funds, legally restricted to be required to be held intact, interest in sinking funds, things of that nature. And so that, certainly the unrestricted net position number is probably the closest thing that approximates, fund balance with operating reserves, understanding that there are still some caveats to that.
That's all I have. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Any other questions or comments?
No, I just wanted to thank Ms. Kerbo and her staff for achieving the Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting. I know that's quite a bit of detailed, hard work to get all of this together, so we really appreciate it. And I'm speaking for everybody. I just happened to speak first this time. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay. Have a vote to accept the,
Do we vote on it, to accept it?
I think we have to have a, like we did last year. Let me look at it real quick. Sorry, I wasn't prepared for that question.
maybe it's just a report.
Yeah, it's just a report.
Okay, all right. Okay, we're done. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you for having me.
Okay. Next item, we'll be opening a public hearing to consider a zone change for Lot 3, City Block 54, from B2, General Business, to R3, two-family district, and a zone change request for Lot
Oh, there is.
3C, City Block 54, from A agricultural to R3, two-family district, located at 2603 John Richardson Road. The request has been submitted by Brian Moore, case file ZON 2023-03. Ms. Helton.
Thank you, Mayor. Before we get into the item, I just want to take a minute to explain the discrepancy between the zone change district that's requested in the agenda caption versus Planning and Zoning Commission's final recommendation. So the Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council can consider zoning districts other than what's being requested, as long as they're more restrictive than what was legally advertised for. So because we advertised the request for R3, you may also consider R2 and R1 because those are more restrictive than the R3 district. So I just wanted to take a minute to just explain why there is a difference there. Are there any questions about that before we get into the request?
But didn't they didn't they suggest R2? Planning and zone?
Yes, they did. But, so that's why I just wanted to explain, because it's not common to have a recommendation that's actually a different zoning classification than what was requested. So I just wanted to clarify that it's okay to make an approval for an R2 or R1 because it is more restrictive than the R3. And we'll get into why Planning and Zoning Commission made that recommendation, but I just wanted to take a minute up front to just explain why you see the difference there.
The way we do zoning agenda notices is such that the original application sets it up, and when we take it to the zoning commission, it's got one caption and it's advertised under that caption. We advertise that meeting and this meeting at the same time. So the agenda has to show what was advertised, even though what staff will ultimately ask you to do is something more strict than what's was advertised and what's in the caption. So we're saving you money by advertising both meetings at the same time under the original request. The recommendation, as I understand it, actually will be the same as what the Planning Commission came up with, which is more restrictive than what was advertised. Does that help?
We'll see. We'll just
Okay.
Let
Okay.
me just ask now, is it Mr. Moore?
Mr. Moore? Mhm.
Is he aware of all the
Yes,
requests?
there was actually a discussion between the commission and Mr. Moore at the meeting, and he agreed with their recommendation. And so they're all supportive.
Okay.
All right. All right, so again, the request is for zone change for 2 adjoining lots on Richardson Street. That's Lot 3 and Lot 3C. These properties are currently zoned B2. That's the 8-acre lot and A agriculture. Again, the original request was for R3 2-family. If you look at the map, the subject property is outlined in yellow. The adjacent properties to the north and west are also zoned R3. And then the other surrounding properties are zoned agriculture, except for, you see those purple tracks on the south side of Richardson Street. Those are B2. And those include Mike Moses Middle School that actually is accessed off of Park Street. All right, so Lot 3, this is the one that's zoned B2. It's approximately 8 acres, and it's currently developed with a single-family residence and a mobile home. Lot 3C, this is the property that's currently zoned agriculture. It's a 1-acre tract that's undeveloped. The applicant does intend to build a single-family home on the property. And because it's 1 acre, the agricultural district requires 2 acres, so the current size actually doesn't meet the zoning requirement. And so that really prompted the initial zone change request. And then when we found out the applicant also owned the adjacent property, we asked them to include it and downzone it to make sure that both properties were more compatible than what the property was currently zoned. All right, so the property fronts along John Richardson Road. So this is where the property would take direct access to. This road also serves as direct access for the other residential uses in the area. This is an older, more narrow road than what we would typically see for residential streets. And so due to the current configuration of the street, any new development would naturally be limited to low-density, single-family uses unless it was improved to increase the capacity that's currently there. So the area is sparsely populated with limited development. Properties within the immediate area are also primarily undeveloped with a few low-density residential uses to the west along the north side of John Richardson Road. The future land use plan calls this area out as rural development, which reflects the development pattern in the area. Staff finds that this request does fit into the goals of the comprehensive plan, specifically by avoiding undesirable development outcomes and ensuring that future development is more compatible with the adjacent properties and zoning in the area than what's there today. Again, Lot 3C, they plan on developing that as a single-family residence, and we find that the request does make the property zoning more compatible than what's there today. And so these are just some character photos of some of the other low-density residential uses that are in the area. These are pretty typical of some of those other properties. So as part of this zone change request, just like all of our applications, we mail letters to all the property owners within 200 feet. We sent 5 notices to property owners within 200 feet. We did receive 1 written response in favor of the request. We also send courtesy notices to all property owners within 500 feet, and we received a verbal response in favor of the request from those notices. So again, the original request was for R3 based on the existing zoning that was already in the area, the desire to create some consistency with the adjacent properties. However, this property is also appropriate for R2 and R1. So after a discussion between the commission and the applicant, the true intent is to develop it as single family. And so the applicant agreed with the Planning and Zoning Commission that the property be zoned to R2 single family instead of R3 2-family. So what you see on your screen, that's the Planning and Zoning Commission recommendation, which the applicant agrees with. And so you have a couple of different options tonight. You can approve the original request to R3. You can approve and be aligned with the Planning and Zoning Commission's recommendation with R2 or even R1, or you could deny the request. Staff supports the recommendation for R2 single family. And the applicant, Brian Moore, is also in attendance if the council should have any questions for him or staff. And that does conclude staff's presentation. So now I'll open it up for any questions from council.
Would you go back to that screen of that road, please?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So you say that we're gonna have to put a new street in there?
No, what I'm saying is the current configuration is naturally going to limit development in that area to low-density, single-family uses. If anything is ever proposed that's more intense than that, then it would require upgrades to this facility to increase the capacity, because right now there's some sections where you can't even get two cars across.
Is this John Richardson Road or is this Logansport?
This is John Richardson Road.
Okay,
Yes.
all right, okay. All
Okay. All right, got it.
Okay.
I have a question.
And this is right in front of the property too, so.
Could he have just got a permit and built a house on that land without changing the zoning?
The zoning requires 2 acres. The lot size, as it stands today,
To
is
build a
1
house
acre.
requires 2 acres?
No, the zoning. So the current zoning for Lot 3C is that green square, that's agriculture. Agriculture requires a 2-acre minimum. The lot is 1 acre, and through research, we found that lot was created after our zoning ordinance was adopted, so it doesn't get to benefit from any kind of grandfathering. It would require a zone change, and so that's really was the impetus of the request, was so the applicant could build a single-family home on the property.
When I look at the ordinance here, it says requested the zoning classification of said property to be changed to R3. So I thought they wanted R2.
So R3 allows for single-family and 2-family. So R3 is intended for lower density residential uses, including single-family
Could we
and
do a
2-family.
single-family zoning just to R1?
Yes, and so that's what we're looking at right now. Now, Planning and Zoning Commission's recommendation was for R2, which is also single-family, but you may also consider R1 for this property. And the 1 acre would also meet the lot size for that district as well. I would recommend asking the applicant if they're supportive of that before making that vote.
The Planning and Zoning Commission unanimously recommended R2?
Yes, ma'am.
Single family?
Mhm.
Okay. And the reason is because the applicant agreed, and the only difference between R2 and R1, I think, is just the size of the lot.
Yeah, R2 requires R1 requires 8250 square feet, and, no, sorry, R1 is 8250, R2 is 6,000 square feet, so that's the difference.
It has nothing to do with no sewage being in that area.
Oh, thank you, yes. So for this property, because it doesn't have access to sewer, it would have to be at least a half acre in order to meet on-site septic. And so the half acre is appropriate for that. And I don't think they plan on subdividing the property any further. So in order to have septic, they would have to at least maintain a half acre on the property. They couldn't go any smaller than that. Any other questions?
I'd like for Mr. Moore to
Okay.
go up here.
Mayor, don't forget to call for public comment as well.
Okay. State your name, Mr.
Brian Moore.
Okay, Mr. Moore. Do you understand this?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, I don't, so.
I've been through the ringer with it for a couple of months now, so yeah, I've learned it over the way, but at the beginning, no, sir. But
Are
I've
you-
studied and researched, yes, sir.
Okay. Are you comfortable with the R2?
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right, okay. That's the only thing I wanted to make sure.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and
Would you be comfortable with R1?
Well, with the R1, I would say that it would be me having to have more space, right, for as the house.
Yeah, I may not understand all this either, so
Yeah,
just
so-
forgive me.
The only difference between R1 and R2 is the minimum lot size. And so the property is currently 1 acre. It's well above the minimum lot size for both R1 and R2. So it wouldn't affect his ability to build a single-family home on the property.
So either way you could go, right?
Right, I just knew it was a difference in the lot size, yeah.
Yeah, I watched the tape of the zoning, and it seemed like you said, I just wanted to build a house, right?
That's it. That's it.
Yeah. And so, where did all the zoning stuff come from?
Because it's agriculture, and you have to have 2 acres with agriculture, and I only have the 1 acre block, so it was no possible way to be able to do it with the 2 acres.
Okay, but you own all 8 acres or something
Well,
there.
the other is our property. I got deeded
Oh,
the 1
okay.
acre with my grandmother.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Okay, it's my fault. I should have asked for public comment on this.
Is there any public comment that would like to make, have any discussion on this? I'll get better at this. Just give me a few meetings. Yes.
Yeah, you only have to do it before you vote.
Okay, all right.
I'm Dr.
All I
Drummond.
gotta do is read this.
This is in close association to Mike Moses, and so I'd just like to have some comment made of how this would have any effect at all on the local school. There's also the Boys and Girls Club across the street.
Okay. Yeah, Ms. Helton?
Are there any more public comments or?
No, anybody else? Okay.
All right, so I think the biggest impact is going to be for that 8 acres. It's currently zoned B2. B2 allows for a lot of intense commercial uses, also allows for multifamily. And so that's why we requested that the applicant include that in the request, so we could downzone it, because we knew it wasn't appropriate. And so we don't anticipate having a negative impact, because this actually limits development on the property even further than what's allowed there right now.
So, the ordinance you included, 1968-05-23, does change the zoning for both lots to R2,
Yes,
correct?
ma'am.
Correct? You might want to change the mayor at the bottom.
Oh, my
That's all right.
apologies.
I just, can we vote on it and know that we're going to change
Yes, ma'am.
mayors?
Mm-hmm,
Okay.
yeah,
Then,
sorry. I wasn't thinking about that whenever I was writing it.
are you ready for a motion, or?
So I actually do have a couple of questions
Alright.
that I want to get to before we get to that point. So the original recommendation to Mr. Moore was that he go to R3. Can you give me some background on why that was the recommendation to him to go to planning and zoning?
Yes, so whenever we met with the applicant, he let us know that he wanted to do single family, and so whenever we look at these requests, we always look at the adjacent zoning in the area to try to ensure that the request is compatible or similar to what's there already today. And so that's why we looked at the R3, but R2 and R1 is also absolutely appropriate for this area. It was just an attempt to create some consistency, and there's always the concern about spot zoning whenever you have a little circle of yellow or green that's different from everything else around it. But spot zoning really is whenever you're taking a piece of property and treating it differently from the other properties just for the benefit of an individual. This is actually going to benefit the individual and benefit the surrounding properties as well. So we wouldn't consider an R2 or R1 spot zoning, even though you don't see that yellow color anywhere else in the immediate area.
And that kind of leads me to my next question, is that the discussion of spot zoning in this case, we're talking, it's not a benefit, it's more restrictive than an R3 would be, right?
Yes.
So that doesn't seem like it would be as much of a concern for spot zoning in general if you have a residential area and you have a more restrictive parcel or lot than you would even in the surroundings. So that's really not a concern, right?
No, if they were requesting something that was more intense than what was there today, then that would be a better case for spot zoning. But since we're down zoning it and actually limiting development even further, then it makes it hard to make that rationale.
One more question. I see that our options here are that we could approve it as originally presented to planning and zoning as R3 or something more restrictive.
Yes.
I know we've discussed in the past doing more restrictive things on a zone change. I've been here a year, and this is the first time I've seen us have options to choose a more restrictive zoning district. Is that common? And do we have that flexibility every time a residential zoning change is brought to us?
You do have that option for any zone change request. You do have the option to consider more restrictive zoning districts than what's being requested. That's always an option. In the past, we've talked about placing conditions on zonings as far as making it more compatible with the adjacent property, whether that's building height or screening, some sort of physical condition on the development. And typically, we look at those whenever there is an opportunity or whenever there could be an adverse impact, whenever there is something that could negatively affect the neighborhood. But in this case, R1 or R2 is going to be much more compatible than the B2 that's there today.
Excellent. That's all I have. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have one more question. He said, Brian said it was heir property, so he inherited it?
Yes. It's a
Does-
family
does he-
trust.
So he inherited it with a lot of, does the family agree to this change? Do
Yes,
they
ma'am.
know about it?
We met with the entire family, and the whole family actually came to the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting as well. And so they're all supportive of Planning and Zoning Commission's recommendation.
I'm sorry, I do have one more question, and this one's probably for Mr. Bartlett. It has nothing to do with your phone going off. Promise you.
Weather alerts, sorry.
How many I'm asking you a tough question. Are there a lot of properties within the interior of the city that don't have access to sewer?
Well, probably a lot is not the best adjective, but certainly, yes, we have some under two conditions. One where we don't necessarily have the utilities available with any proximity, excuse me, and the other is where physically they can't get into a sewer line. For example, Mystic Lane, we have some properties, sewer was added later, some of those properties can't get up the hill. So we have both conditions, but yeah, I would say there's certainly, every year we probably permit maybe a half a dozen properties to use on-site systems because they have restrictions. Generally not commercial, generally they're residential in a low-density area.
So in this scenario, are there no options for utility extensions?
No, sir, there's no practical option, especially at the density of development there. It's would be a really upside-down return. So this is where we'll just approve. And by the way, we work with the county. We don't maintain staff that's licensed to issue on-site septic systems and on-site aerobic systems. And so the county works with us to actually do that permitting through TCEQ and do the inspections for us. So it'll be fully vetted, but we approve it through engineering as an alternative when they can't get to a system.
Excellent, thank you. This has been quite the education tonight.
Okay, any other questions? I'll call for a vote.
So I'll make the motion to approve zoning for R2 single family, just because that's what planning and zoning did, and for both lots as described in the ordinance.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Thank you, Ms. Helton.
Thank you, Ms. Helton.
Okay, next item on the agenda is consider approval of a fee schedule for rental of pickleball courts. And Mr. Bray, and I will open this up for public comment.
Oh, no.
Huh? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. It's right there. Sorry. All I gotta do is read.
Good evening, Mayor and Councilman Brian Bray, your Community Services Director. I think both times I'm coming here this evening, everyone's leaving, so I don't know if it's me or the next item. I don't really know what's going on. But this is not the first time, nor will it be the last time that I come and speak to you all about pickleball. I'm sure every one of you have heard from friends about the sport, or you have played it yourself, or you've at least watched it. But in the last year, we have installed 6 multi-use courts at the Bonita Creek Park, and just a few months ago, opened up 12 courts at the Maroney Park. And since we started the operation of renovating those courts at the Maroney complex, our staff has received multiple calls. I'm stopped as I'm going around town asking, hey, what is it going to be like to be able to hold a fundraiser there? And during our research, which I'll get into in here in just a moment, on the fee schedule, every city that we talked to that had pickleball courts said, get ready, it's the next 5K fundraiser for nonprofits. And so that is why we are coming before you this evening, not as a revenue generator. This is not something that we are saying, hey, let's make money on this trend. It is something that so that we can regulate the number of tournaments and how that process works, starting with the fee schedule. So we visited with, I think, 11 different cities. We did not call every city in East Texas. You can see the list at the bottom, because we knew they didn't have pickleball courts. So there wasn't any reason to call them. We went ahead and called Lufkin because I wasn't sure whether they had some agreement with their private facility there, but they do not. And as you can see, we only found Longview, St. George, Utah, and Brigham City, Utah. There are lots of other cities in the United States, I do understand, that have pickleball courts and have facilities. But as we were calling around and looking at listservs, these two cities in Utah kept coming back up. So we contacted them because Utah is apparently the mecca of all things pickleball. They host national tournaments. They have fixed cameras on all of the courts. They're nationally broadcast. They've been doing this for a number of years, and so we decided to go to them and get their expertise. You can see their fee schedule there is really kind of out of our realm, $90 per court as an expert, as a professional. That's not where we are today. So what we did was we looked at what are the fees that we have here locally that we could kind of use as a comparison. So for renting Liberty Hall, it's $140 for 4 hours, or $280 for an 8-hour day. Or you can rent a pavilion at a park for $50 a day. That's really the only thing that we had to kind of get some basis to come up with this. $75 for Bonita Creek for a day, $100 for Maroney Park for half of the facility, or $200 for 12 courts, which is the whole facility. So when we presented this to the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board just last week, the initial conversation started off with, well, that's not enough money. And that was the consensus for probably 20 minutes of that conversation. And then as the conversation evolved, they realized we don't really have anything to base that theory on besides our thought is it's not enough money. So ultimately, they made a unanimous recommendation to bring this fee schedule to you, City Council, for consideration of adopting, with the understanding that that group would like staff to bring back 8, 10, 12 tournaments. They didn't give a number. They said, after you've had several tournaments, come back to us. Let's talk about that fee schedule, and they may recommend a higher fee schedule. But once again, this body here, City Council, is the only one that can make that or can act that fee schedule. So, Mayor, the recommendation is $75 for Bonita Creek, which is the multi-use courts. It is less than Maroney because it's not dedicated pickleball courts. If somebody were to host a tournament there, there's 2 permanent nets, and they would have to provide 4 temporary nets of their own. For half at Maroney is $100. If you're going to do it 2 days, it'd be $150. If you want to rent the entire facility for 1 day, it's $200, or 2 days, it would be $300. So, Mayor, I'd be happy to answer any questions after public comment.
Okay, anybody want to have any public comment on pickleball rates? Okay, any discussion, please?
I'll start.
Well, I just have one comment, and I may have the issue where there's 12 courts, full day, so that means all the courts are not available at Maroney Park doing that.
Yes, sir, that would be correct.
That's going to upset a lot of us pickleball people.
Yes, Mr. Bolden, and that is, so the second part of this, after we figure out whatever fee schedule the City Council is comfortable with, staff then develops a policy on how that is used. So just purely for discussion, this is not a staff recommendation. Is it that only the first weekend and the last weekend of the month are available for tournaments, and the second and the third are open to the general public? Or is it 1 a month? Is it 3 a month? That's a discussion that staff will have with the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board on how often those courts can be rented for tournaments. This is not for Mayor Johnson having a family reunion. This is tournament rental of these facilities. Otherwise, it is open and free to the public. When we talked with our donors or the main donor of this project, that was one of her desires, was to keep it open to the general public. That is me as the director. That's also one of my desires, is to make sure that the citizens have the majority of the use of that complex. But we do need to set aside certain times to allow for tournaments.
And starting and stopping time?
That would all be part of the policy, yes, sir.
I think that you're gonna find after you go along with this for a few weeks that you could tie this up with tournaments every weekend, and that's pretty cheap. Somebody's gonna be making money on it because it's gonna have to be entry fees, just like golf tournaments. Right. And people that like to play pickleball on the weekends, we'll have to look at it, but I'm okay with the fees right now until we get some more information on our history on how many people want to rent the
facility.
Yes, sir, and there are other entities like disc golf, which are now municipalities are going to a per head fee. So there's a flat fee, just as an example, again, this is not a recommendation, so don't put this down as Brian said, but whether it's a, $100 for 6 courts and then a $2 fee per person that plays. I mean, there are other ways to structure it as opposed to just a flat fee.
I believe you, when we open those courts, I think there's a picture floating around social media of you out there, right? Playing a little pickleball.
Yes, sir, I have played pickleball several times out there.
Okay. Just thought I'd bring a little levity to the discussion. Thinking about this in a big picture, how much have we expended, both from donated funds and in general, on pickleball courts, getting them ready to use? Just
That is a
generally.
number that I am not able to give you without doing some research.
that's
and pulling them
perfectly
up.
fine.
I can tell you what it cost to resurface Moroni, and that was $68,000, but there's a lot more that's gone into both complexes than just that.
And I remember that 70,000 number. How many inquiries have we gotten to use the court so far for tournaments? And have we had to turn anyone away because we don't have a fee schedule yet?
We did not record the number of inquiries, and yes, we have had to turn people away because we did not have a fee schedule set up. We allowed one that is going to be in October, reassuring those people that were requesting that tournament that there would be a fee schedule in place prior to them having their tournament. So
Okay.
they are on the books, awaiting your fee schedule.
Okay, we better get it booked then.
In the future, because I do realize the need to hurry up and vote on this, so, and I'm planning to vote in favor of all that. But in the future, I'd like us to consider tournaments or that benefit people in the city, for example, nonprofit organizations within the city versus outside of the city, if they're, because the city pays all of this. So to me, there's some kind of usage.
Yes, ma'am, and there is a fee waiver policy, which I believe you all adopted last year, which would make those nonprofits eligible for free use, should they apply and be granted.
So this would apply to.
So the fee waiver policy, yes, ma'am, that does apply to, and I'm looking at City Attorney Kirkland, I believe all fees, or at least the fees in the recreation world, we'll limit it to that. So yes, ma'am, that fee waiver policy does apply to all fees that are charged through recreation. And so should the Women's Job Corps want to hold a tournament next month and they had to pay this fee, they then apply, and if they are approved, they get that fee reimbursed. So then it would charge the for-profits and decrease the nonprofits, which I believe is what you were intending.
Well, and also, I know the tournaments bring people from outside, so it's not quite as clear, but I'm just thinking of people in the city who pay the bill versus the people in the county. And that's all. I'm ready to make a motion. If unless other people have questions.
Anybody else have any questions?
Okay. So I'll make the motion that we approve the fee schedule for the rental of pickleball courts as presented.
Second?
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Next item on the agenda is to receive a report and hold a discussion and give staff direction regarding repairs to the City Hall roof and the replacement of mechanical HVAC systems. Director of Public Works.
Mayor Council, Steve Bartlett, Director of Public Works, City Engineer. Mayor Johnson and Councilman Mall, I was hoping we'd go a few meetings with you before you got to find out what my famous public name is, but I'm often called Bad News Bartlett, so that's why I'm here.
Welcome.
But I did it off the first meeting, so boy. Today is just a discussion item. I would like to get some consensus and direction from you. And to give you a little background, in this year's budget, we have $200,000 budgeted for the new roof. It's, if you walk down the halls, you'll see a lot of stained tiles, and you know it's been something we've struggled with for a number of years. We have arrested our major leaks for very temporarily, spent about $7,000, I believe, fixing drains and gooping up holes and everything that goes with that. So we've had some very minor leaks even during our major rain last week, but I will tell you it's very temporary, so it's not a permanent solution. Our roof is worn out and needs replacement. So we moved forward. We hired Army Curtis. There he is, Army Curtis, who's helped us on a number of projects. And why would we need an architect for a roof replacement? You and I just hire a contractor at home to do a roof replacement. There's a significant amount of infrastructure on that roof, things that have to be looked at, replaced, design drawings, specifications, and even construction inspection. Army helped us do the recreation center and library roof, and it was a many month project, and we were delighted to have somebody with his expertise to guide it. So it's necessary for us to have a professional to help do these projects. So we engaged Army to help us do that, and in early discussions with Army, of course, we said, hey, we're going to have to remove all the rooftop air conditioning units. Now, not all of them are on the roof. They're in various places, but that's going to take a crane parked across the street and use that to remove the units. We fix the roof, which also takes a crane to deliver materials, and then the units go back on new curbed areas. A number of those units, if not all of those units, are in very poor repair. You can ask third floor finance department, who has their own set of portable air conditioners that they use very frequently, as well as other staff, because we are constantly in and out of having air conditioning problems. I've made the joke that we need a 1,000-gallon tank of Freon parked in the back of the building, because every week when I drive up, there's some mechanical guy filling Freon. So our systems are bad. So in that light, we asked Army to help us to go out and get a mechanical engineer, a firm, to evaluate all of our systems in the building. That report we sent to you and was attached. The summary of that report is that everything we have, except for 2 units that we did replace in 2019, I believe, are very at or beyond end of life, according to that. Some of them are working today. You're feeling air conditioning, but that may not be the case tomorrow. So we're at a point where our $200,000 budget for the roof came in at about $209,000, and so I'm actually kind of proud of that number. We haven't been hitting that close in this environment. But what we found out is that all the waterproofing, in fact, when you walk around the building, the kind of reddish, orangish color you see on the side of the building is not paint, it's actually waterproofing, and that waterproofing extends over the parapet walls. So part of the leaks we're having, especially in the perimeter offices, is where it's coming down and getting in the wall, not just the roof being bad. So Army had a waterproofing specialist come look and advise us, and we found out we need to re-waterproof all that and chip it off. So there's a whole waterproofing exercise there, as well as a re-roofing exercise. And then to throw it, another candle on the birthday cake, all the mechanical systems are up for consideration. So what I'm sorry, let me flip forward here. There we go. So you can see that the mechanical system replacement, if we did it across all of City Hall, is $530,000. That waterproofing, and that's a working budget, I think, a not-to-exceed budget, maybe, Army, is about $50,000. We will have A&E design fees, and we've got a $40,000 contingency in this. The contractor that we are using is a buy-board person, so we're not actually having to go through what you would consider a normal procurement bid process. These folks have already been bid. So this is where we use these services from buy-board, and they've already got the lowest structured price for government entities like us and school districts. So we've been able to work directly to get very good pricing right now up front for you. So the package, $869,000, had Pam threw something at me, I think, and so it was well above our budget, and we certainly don't have that cash in hand right now to be able to address that. So the question is, because we've temporarily arrested 98% of our leaking, don't know how long that'll handle, do we want to look at pushing all this into the upcoming budget, because that's where we are right now, filling in those holes? Do we want to look at that? Do we want to look at just a portion of the mechanical systems? And you're going to ask me, Steve, which portion do you want to do? What I'm telling you is all 4 tires on the car are worn out, and so we're going to have a flat pretty quickly. So it's just a discussion, and I'll try to answer questions. Army's here to back me up with real-life smart answers, and we can certainly get comments from the public as well and see if we can work through kind of what your thoughts are. What we really need to know is, do we need to do something now and move forward, which will require an additional financial discussion with you on how to garner those funds? Do we want to put it in the next budget? And do we want to look at a partial replacement of those units? So, Mayor, I'll be happy to step aside while we.
Okay, I'd like to offer, any public input on this topic. If none, we'll open it up for discussion with the council, please.
I have a quick question, and this will probably be my only question. How much did we set aside? I know we had set aside dollars for the roof repair.
200,000.
200,000?
Yes, and that's still currently there.
Okay, that's what I wanted.
In this year's budget.
In this year's budget. So we could do a carryover, Pam, of that, and so that 869 minus 200 would be where we would be looking at in the future budget.
And the pickleball courts can't pay for it?
Not at $100, we'd have to go beyond that, so.
What's the average age of the units, high-back units?
So a bunch of them are 2011 vintage, or 2011 vintage.
What's
so.
the expected lifetime?
So, and let me pull the report and kind of give you that. And Army may mark out loud, so so rooftop air conditioning units are 15 years, and split air conditioning units, we have some split systems also, are also a 15-year life. So you can see a 2011, by 2026, they would be there. So realize by the time we get this designed and bid and built, we've added another year to that life, and we're backing up right up to the 15.
Is this climate acceptable for heat pumps?
So some of these proposed replacements are a heat pump system, and a little different where they don't necessarily have the induct heating coils. They're a heat pump related system. So yes, and I apologize, I'm not a deep HVAC mechanical engineer, so I've been reading the same report that you have. But yeah, it looks like we will be able to modernize that. I suspect you will find, because some of these are 2000 vintage, some of these are up to 2011 vintage. So some, by the way, Councilman, are beyond that 15 years for sure, significantly. But I think the technology and the efficiencies of these units will certainly be better than they were in that era. So I think we'll see some energy-related savings. Is that going to offset $900,000? No, I'm not saying that, but I'm saying I think we will see some savings.
You know I'm not in favor of heat pump, right? Well, I had a Carrier heat, I didn't want to name Carrier, but anyway, I had a heat pump installed. And it works fine, except when you have a cold snap.
Except when you need heat.
Yeah, it just freezes up.
Well, if I'm not
There's nothing they
mistaken,
can do about it.
I think a lot of the heat pumps also have a supplemental
It does.
heat system in
But,
it, so I
but
think
that's
it's
when
available.
it's costly because it goes all electric.
Right, which is actually where we are today, though. You know, our systems are all basically electric heat.
Oh, okay.
So we would, I hope at the not cold but cooler scenarios, the heat pump may well help us maintain temps. During super cold, well, you're right, we're gonna kick it into high gear with some electric heat assistance.
Oh, yeah, and I tell you, mine, electric bill double.
Yep.
Let me ask you something, Steve. If you felt like you couldn't do it all, what would you do?
Well, I think what's really, truly, absolutely necessary with the roof is all the rooftop units. I mean, because we're gonna take them off, pay to take them off, and pay to put them back on, only to probably pay to take them off, to fix them in the very, very near future. So, and in fact, I will tell you, you're subject to some of them not working once you've taken them off and replaced them. So the roof at the minimum would be what I suggest. Now, Army and I haven't exactly quantified that because we were actually talking today thinking, you know, what questions would you want to know? And we can go back and get that bundled together a little bit because there's some ancillary things that go with that, plumbing, piping, some air units inside the building that would need to go with it. So we can get that identified. But I will tell you, our gut guess is that's 175 to 200 to just do the roofing stuff and the associated air handlers that go with that. And I can perfect that number, but that's my best guess.
Okay, which is $330,000
Less, yes, sir.
What you've got here.
Yes, sir. And there will still be in the next budget year, so I'll make a promise, we will be fixing air conditioner units on top of that.
Will that take care of the third floor back in Pam's office?
Yes, please. Oh, no, then we gotta keep talking.
Army, Army, come on up, Army.
Mayor Council. No, that will not fix the finance office. They are on a split system that is handled by air handlers on that section of the building, whose heat pumps are sitting on the ground at the back of the building. And those are probably some of your most problematic units in the building.
Those are the ones that were installed in 2000, right?
I believe so.
Yeah.
And I
Those are
think,
the oldest ones.
and it was one of those situations when you start pulling at the string, the proverbial string, it's not just the overall condition of the units or the age of the units themselves, but the air handlers in the building, there has been modifications over time that are affecting the efficiency and performance of getting air into all of those offices. So while we are looking at also getting new units, there's going to be a lot of repair work to get all these ducts tied back together, having the outside air working the way it should be instead of just sucking in raw outside air in the middle of summer and not having it properly conditioned. So there's a lot of efficiencies that you're missing right now because of the state of the mechanical systems.
And I'd like to do it all, but it's one of those deals. We also know that we have a capital needs committee that's going to come to us in July. And, you know, we have to be real smart with our money right now because we're going to ask the people to help us out with drainage and sewage and everything else. So I don't know if we can bite off the whole, I mean, it's the council's, whatever y'all want to do, but that's my thought on it.
So I have a few questions, and I don't know who they should be directed to. I know you've talked about efficiencies with our current system. Are there also air quality issues in the building that you're aware of, either of you?
None that I'm aware of. We didn't encounter environmental conditions that were obvious to observation. There was no testing done per se either, but we did not see any obvious, organics anywhere that we were looking. So, because we did look at all of the indoor air handlers, you do have a lot of split systems on the building, and it's not just a third floor either. So, but no, we did not see any obvious issues that would cause air quality issues.
So, in your opinion, this proposal and the replacement is the best long-term solution for the city?
Yes, absolutely.
Because this is a question for the entire group and our staff. I think we intend to occupy this building for a good long time. And I don't know, I would like to know, as we bring this back for formal action, what are we paying in maintenance on units? What are we paying in utilities to cool and heat the building? Is there any means for us to also implement some form of energy management within this building, if nowhere else, and try and save additional dollars to prevent cooling areas and heating areas on weekends when we're not here?
Yeah, I mean, there can be, as part of the response would be to understand what an energy management system could do for the building. It is another cost.
Certainly.
As well as a means of managing that.
Of course.
Right. And as far as the maintenance, I think it's going to be an interesting response as to what the maintenance is, because the big split systems that are handling the southern portion of the building, you've probably got a lot of maintenance going on a yearly basis that you're going to probably be surprised at.
So that's kind of the terms I want to couch it in, because if we're going to continue to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars a year in maintenance, I don't want us to be in a position where we're just throwing more good money after bad. And if we could spend, $500,000 now and take care of the problem for the foreseeable future, the next 10 to 15 years, I'd rather do that than to sink 300,000 into maintenance and then end up right back where we are having this discussion. And then one final point that I want to make, I happened across one of my constituents who works on the third floor and in Travis Clardy's office, and I know that they have had to continually, on the roof side, continually have to have trash cans to catch the leaks. And that is incredibly embarrassing to me as an elected official for the city, for our state representative, whoever that is, to be officing in our building and have to welcome constituents in. Can you step around this trash can that's full of water? That's unacceptable on the roof side. That has to be fixed. And so I don't know what we do on the HVAC stuff, but we have to get the roof done. I know we've pushed it a couple of budget years because we couldn't get quotes or whatever happened, but I'm all in favor of moving that part forward for sure.
I think it's fair to say in our analogy of 4 Bolt tires, and if you replace 2 of them in the near future, you will be replacing the other 2. So we're just deferring the maintenance on this. There will be an elevated cost. There's no doubt about that. And so I don't think we're going to go another 10 years before we see cost. I think you're going to do what you're deferring. If you defer, and that's absolutely fine, that's your judgment, I think those costs will become real over the next few years.
One last question, Mr. Bartlett. When was the last time the roof on the building was replaced? I don't know if I've seen that.
You know, I'm not sure that it has been replaced. I think it's original 2000. I mean, when we renovated.
It looked like it's from the renovation of the building.
Of the 2000
It
renovation.
is definitely an older style of commercial roofing. It is definitely worn through in some areas, and probably it is worn through in some areas and is well past its expected lifetime. And part of the response in the re-roofing is we feel like that we have some roof deck issues in portions of it and we've accounted for that in the design, is to have that replaced when we have the roof demolished.
You didn't see any hail damage or wind damage up there when you.
That'd be for your insurance people.
You talked about a lot of different systems and split systems and stuff. If you had your wishes, is there a better way to do this whole building? Come on, dream with me.
I don't know. I think it's really, when we talked and walked through with the mechanical engineer, we talked about possibly introducing different systems, but it's really more of a like-for-like replacement is what's being proposed, mainly because of the way the building is constructed. You know, we're dealing with an old building here. There were certain chases that were set up for the pipe runs that were, and so to reuse that all made sense. The bigger split systems and bigger heat pumps even are certainly viable systems, and we still use them in new construction to this date. It really depends what the situation might be. We try not to get into something where if we're going to introduce, say, gas heating, that's a whole nother animal. And it starts to have other impacts into the building systems when you introduce that element and as a safety issue and how it gets vented. And now we're poking more holes through the roof and things like that.
Well, I noticed in here as you tear into the building, I know for me, every time I open something up, there's a can of worms there, kind of, you know.
Right.
I mean, I find other things. Are you going to find things that need to be fixed you don't know about, like asbestos and things like that?
I don't know of any asbestos at the moment. We would need to check a report, if there's a report on file first for the building to
Are
see.
there surprises waiting for you?
There always is. I mean, that's why the contingency is there to help with mitigate some of that. So yeah, I mean, there's always something that pops up. And so we try to foresee some of that based on prior experience, and that's where this roof decking issue came from. There is elements within the design to knowingly have that handy and ready to replace because of what we've observed. And we've actually cored the roof in places to see what's underneath it. And so that's where we're developing some of those decisions from. I say this too, I'll just go back to the mechanical systems for a second. The rooftop units that are up on the top, those are gas heat, okay? So there is a gas line that runs on the top of the roof. The problem with the other units, though, is that because the air handlers are separated and are internal to the building, they're on an electric heat system. That's the heat pump part. So rooftops, gas-fed rooftops especially, are especially useful when you can directly duct down to the spaces. And so predominantly that's what you have over most of the building. But for whatever reason, the southern portion of the building, they didn't do that originally. And so they're all being fed with similar systems of these heat pumps. I just wanted to clarify that for FYI, what's in your building.
Okay, any other questions?
I just think the scary part is you start out wanting to replace a roof and you've got the money in the budget and it went from 200,000 to almost $1 million. That's what's scary. I understand it, but.
Anybody got any more questions?
No question. I just want to make a comment about the heat pump because I stated it like I was unsatisfied or unhappy with my heat pump, but that's not the case. Except maybe 3 times a year when it's get below 32 or whatever. But the rest of the year, it is a cost-effective system. So just want to make sure you.
Anybody have any other questions? Okay, now we need to give him direction on what to do.
So,
Thank you.
let me just, I do have a sort of a question,
I'm
sorry.
sorry.
But that's okay, he can sit down. I'm just
No,
trying to get a.
She has a.
Oh, you have a question.
Lynn has a question. I'm sorry, Lynn.
I don't know if I missed it or not, but
Will you please come up to?
where's this money gonna come from?
You have to come up, Lynn.
Nobody can hear me.
Part of it is it's recorded, and then there are people outside watching, so you gotta talk in the mic.
So Lynn Clark, I don't live in the city, I live in the county, but I don't know if I missed it, but did anybody say where this money's gonna come from? Are we gonna borrow it? Or do we have a little slush fund somewhere that we're gonna come up with $600,000 when we have all the other things that we have to fix with the city? So where's the money gonna come from? That's my question.
Well, you go ahead.
So the answer is there's limited funds. There's also funds available. There's cash in the general fund. So the question is maybe not where does it come from as much as does it supplant something else? So what you'll see is we'll put it in the budget. Your budget will then reflect this as one of many things requested in the budget. And ultimately, you'll come to see what income or revenue side is necessary to satisfy that. So it's not that we're trying to spend it today and we don't have it. It'll be a budget item, and quite honestly, as you're addressing tax rates, it'll be a part of that overall expenditure that we'll be proposing. And what you may find is that we can't do something else in order to do this. And so the answer, we don't have the answer other than it will be on our list of things that we try to afford, and how do we afford it is what council and finance works out.
So I'm trying to get a grasp on, I know when you replace all this, there will be savings in both hopefully in the energy costs that we're gonna run up and also the repair costs. So I'm trying to get just a gauge on that because, just a rough gauge if you have one, but you may not.
I do not have a rough gauge, but I can get you some information. I will tell you, I kind of giggled when he was talking about the third floor having our own air conditioning units. We moved in here in 2001? We've had 3 summers that the third floor has not lost air conditioning for weeks at a time. 90 degrees in our offices. So this is an ongoing thing. So when we start, we can tell you what we have invoices for the last 3 to 5 years, but there's been maintenance costs forever on these units. Ours, he laughed about the Freon. We routinely call for Freon fill-ups every few months. it's starting to get hot, it's coming. We're gonna be able to give you some dollar figures over the last few years, understanding it's gonna be much bigger than that for all the years that we don't have those invoices anymore. There are, the electrical savings are gonna be a little bit more difficult to quantify. Just because we would have to sit down and look at these new units, what their efficiencies are, and just kind of calculate based on what we think these old ones are doing and the kilowatt hours that we're pulling on those. And we can estimate that for you. It's still gonna be a very rough estimate of what we think a really bad unit is pulling and what a brand new one should. So we can get y'all some of those numbers. I do not have a number off the top of my head. I just know that we make that phone call ourselves on the third floor to get Freon very frequently, and that's not a cheap thing. We've, over time, for years, couldn't figure out exactly what the problem was. And so we spent a lot, we would go through multiple vendors coming in trying to figure out what our problem really was. So there has been some maintenance cost over time, and like you said, it's only gonna get worse because it's not getting any better, I promise you that. So there are a multitude of things that we can come, like I said, during the budget process, and we can get creative as you want us to. So there are options for me to come to you with different things, and I am happy to do that. Just to kind of give you some ideas of how we can fund this and how to pay for this. But I'm like everyone else. At some point, we're throwing good money after bad. We've got to figure out a way to make this work. And I think I can get y'all some pretty hard numbers that prove up that we are spending more than we should on maintenance on a normal system. So I will work on that, and I'll get that to y'all in the next few days.
Well, not if it's, I mean, I don't want a ton of extra, just.
No, it's not. I mean, I can only go back the number of years that we have the invoices for it, but I can get you a rough estimate of what we're spending on average.
Hopefully the people who have HVAC equipment and everything can tell us something about the cost savings we would anticipate over the next 3 years.
And I think and Army and I will try to work and see if they can give us some kind of rule of thumb for this new equipment versus that. They might be able to give us some generalized percentages.
Didn't this equipment have problems from the get-go, some of it, if I recall?
As Pam told you, since the beginning of time, they have had problems.
But some of that,
Yes.
right, there was, okay, I was just remembering my.
Yeah, and I can't speak to any and every repair, but it's been, I mean, we gave them their own parking spot out back.
I think there was anyway, there was
So this is probably a question for Ms. Kerbo, and I'm sorry you just sat down. From an expenditure standpoint, do we have numbers on the utility cost within this building alone?
It's City Hall total.
Okay.
So, yeah, but yes, it's metered, and we can tell you what City Hall uses on now, how much of that is what. I'm not gonna be able to break that down, but I can tell you by City Hall.
In electricity and in natural gas?
Yes.
Excellent. If you, just for whatever window you can provide, that would be great. I just, from having done this with the school district, we were able to save a significant amount of money, and then having to budget less for utility expenses. I think we ended up saving, just by not running the units all the time on the weekends and those things kicking on, about 25% off of our utility costs over the course of the last 5 years.
Well, y'all talked earlier about the energy management and stuff, and that, we went through that years ago. We did, and we come in and they said, okay, this unit, we're gonna set at 73 and everybody's gonna be happy. Our problem though, and like Army said, is these ducts and these things are not feeding correctly. So this office and this office is 73 and 93. And so one's getting air and one's not. And we've had all kinds of stuff. So I think at the end of the day, once we can fix some of these issues, then even the mechanic, I mean, the energy management that we went through then probably would have worked had we had the mechanics in place to help that. So once we get that fixed, then that's definitely something that we can look at, because right now we have to override our systems just to have a room next to each other that people can actually function in. Down our hall, we still, today, every day, our purchasing manager is in the furthest hall. He gets very little air, so he just has a permanent portable air conditioner all the time. Because we can't, I would freeze and he would sweat. So there are things that, like I said, if we can get those things fixed, those cost-saving measures we can put back in place. Unfortunately, it was never done right, I think, to begin with. There was just some issues with the way he said the back side of this building. It needs to be addressed, and then we definitely look at some of those cost-saving measures. They'll work this time, hopefully.
You know, Mr. Huckabee, I mean, for example, the city manager's conference room that all of you have met in, the thermostat for that is across the hall in the city attorney's office. So, you know, controlling that, I mean, it's not even sensing the air that it's using. So we would be very interested in seeing if we could do a better job of just looking at that. And again, that's outside my knowledge base, but I think we've got messed up things like that that are causing us to thermostat one area to serve another, that again are inefficiencies alone. So some of that, I think we can at least look at how to cure that. I'm anxious to do that as part of this.
Excellent.
So this gets back to Mr. Maul's question. This does it all, pretty much?
That replaces every unit here.
And the ductwork and the...
Well, the necessary
the
components of
necessary
it, how about that?
components,
Yes.
okay.
I'm sure some of it is certainly salvageable and some is gonna need to be readdressed, but yes. Based on their evaluation, this gets us a full meal deal. Yes, ma'am.
Is that the direction you needed?
Certainly. So let me just restate it. So Pam and I and Army will bring back to you some additional findings and some numbers for you to take a look at. I mean, the fork in the road for us is, do we look for funding, you know, literally in this fiscal year and talk to you about that? Or do we program this as a budget item? Which is kind of where we thought we were heading, since we've arrested at least a majority of our leaks, even in Clardy's office, I hope. Her bucket's smaller now, so we're wanting to do that. So yeah, hopefully we can bridge until we can do this. Army and I don't know exactly, but I'll promise you some of this equipment is not yard available. So when we put together the package and we go through a bid process, we may have months and months and months of delivery time to get some of this done. So there's some logistics that go on with the roof versus the rest of it. Don't know how that plays out yet, but we know that we need to get rolling, because it will not be something they do in 30 days. It'll have a significant duration to get to the end of it.
So with that, if we're waiting on equipment, that means we can't replace the roof until we have that equipment.
Correct. For that piece,
For the
yes.
part on the roof. So if we're going to replace the units on the roof, we need to do that. We need to have that in place sooner rather than later.
And Army and I will, well, I said we wanted some feedback from you guys, but Army and I can investigate those rooftop units, the availability of them, I guess, specifically, because we've got them quantified, and find out if they're a long lead or a short lead item, and how that would work out in logistics. And we'll provide you a little half-sheet white paper on that, along with these others, to kind of show you what the logistics might be. I'm sure some of these other split systems and other components and air handlers may, you know, have to come from a location that's going to delay it. So just don't know the answer. We're just suspicious in this purchasing environment that everything's not sitting in a warehouse.
So the roof's not leaking right now?
The roof's not leaking a lot right now,
Well, it is leaking?
but there are leaks, yes. And part of those leaks, Brad, is because of our waterproofing on the walls. There's still some areas that when the drains get super overloaded, as in 7 inches of rain, it does overwhelm some of the repairs. As our head maintenance guy told me, I need to goop up some more stuff. So we're probably gonna have to keep up with it. But from the mini buckets that we had, for example, in the office you're talking about, and they were tubs, we went to just, you know, that much. So I felt successful with that. But it's still a pain, and we still have stained tiles that I'm embarrassed walking developers down the hall here, you know, because our roof, the tiles are falling in literally. And so we need to get that part fixed. But we're at, I'm just making this up, but 95% of the leaks arrested for the time being. but I think that's a few month duration success.
Yes, sir. If you'll come up, please.
I sit on that side for the school district, and something that's not been mentioned very much is inflation, and we see that gobbling up our budget. Number two is availability. When you need it, they don't have it. Dependability, they slam them together in the summer because it's so hot, and so you get the unit and immediately it's not working. And the last thing is emergency. It's now an emergency state, and I must fix it now. That's what we face, and that's what you face. We actually pre-bought our HVACs and put them on the ground before we actually had some of the buildings ready to put them in. But it was available, and it saved us cost in the installation, and it gives us a better continuity of getting things done. So y'all have to come up with the solutions, but sometimes the best solutions are seeking maybe a historical grant or some foundation or some other combination. But the thing is, we can kick the can, but eventually it's going to cost more, and it's going to take longer, and it probably will not be as good a product. So all I can say is we were very lucky, and we've been told over and over, you better thank God that you got those HVACs, because other schools, they couldn't open their schools because they didn't have HVACs. Do we want an emergency here where we can't run this building? So I'm not doing anything except saying y'all must work together as a team and come up with a solution that's not just based on money, but safety for the people who depend on. We depend on you in this city, and this city is the largest one in our county. So what you do is really important, and I know that you'll use wisdom, and getting information is good, but the price today is going to be different than the price in 6 months, a lot different. So just keep those things in mind, that y'all have all this budget crunch and crush, but you have to declare where this stands to you as a board, not by this committee or that committee, because you're the one that makes the final decision. And I didn't mean to talk this long, but for us, we were lucky because we were counseled by those, and we said, okay, take bond money, buy them. We did, and we won by doing that. So you all have to come up with a plan that works for this city, this building, and the people that you care for. Thank you so much.
Sure. Mr. Bartlett, did we give you enough direction?
You did, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Comments? Okay. Next item, we will go into executive session. Executive sessions are for city council to receive information and deliberate on matters specified in Chapter D of the Texas Open Meetings Act. Council may reconvene in open session to vote on the matter. This is a little bit unusual that we have executive session in the middle of our agenda, but we've got some housekeeping issues that we have to do to keep going forward. The time now is 7:40 p.m., and we will be in executive session. Is that right?
Okay, go ahead.
Deliberation regarding economic development negotiations under Government Code Section 551.087 as follows.
Thank you. Good job.
I'm sorry. Executive session, and there's no action taken for executive session, and we'll reopen the meeting at 8:20 p.m. and we'll continue our regular agenda. Item 10A, consider approval of a resolution creating a Chapter 380 Economic Development Program and authorizing an agreement by and between the City of Nacogdoches and Benefield Estates regarding the development of a residential subdivision. Larissa, the Economic Development Director.
Yes, sir. Thank you all for having me. This development is being proposed by Mr. Sam Wright. who is the representative of Benefield Estates. The name of the subdivision is Kew Gardens, and it is located on the north side of Highway 7 East near Humphrey Road. It's going to be just east of the 7 and 21 split. Mr. Wright is proposing a 30-lot subdivision. He has proposed that the houses would be marketed at about $350,000. They would be 1,800 square foot homes. The agreement we have in the agenda today is very similar to the agreement that the City Council approved for Jake Crawford previously. It is associated with the reimbursement of the infrastructure costs for each lot. The incentive would supply $8,000 per lot reimbursement, or up to 30% of lot costs, and that reimbursement would be paid upon the issuance of a certificate of occupancy and a request for payment from the developer. It is a 5-year term. The costs, and these are all included in the packet. I'm not going to run through those line by line. I know it's been a long night, but essentially this would refund costs associated with sewer, drainage, water, paving, site work, non-city utilities, and then soft costs like engineering and things like that. And I put this in front of you just to showcase exactly what goes into paying for a subdivision. And this does not include land costs, which obviously can be a factor. There are different funding sources for each one of these items. The sewer and water and drainage is all paid out of utility funds. The paving would be paid out of Street Capital General Fund. The site work, the non-city utilities, and then the soft costs would be paid out of the economic development, which comes out of the general fund. This is just a layout of the subdivision. As I said, it is a 30-lot subdivision. I apologize, this map does not point north, but I wanted to get the layout as big as I could on the screen there. To the left of the screen is Highway 7, so this will run north off of Highway 7, and then that line at the top of the screen is Humphrey Road, which would run parallel to this subdivision. These are proposed to be, this property is zoned R3, which is 2-family residential. These lots are proposed to be at least 50 feet wide, but also 200 feet deep. So they are much larger than your typical R3 sized lot. However, they are 50 feet wide, which is typical for an R3 subdivision. And this is just a proposed exhibit showing what the homes would look like. Mr. Wright is here to answer any questions you may have of him or his development, and I'd be happy to answer any questions as well after public comment.
Okay, we'll open it up to public comment if there's anybody that's got anything to say. If not, we'll open it up for council discussion and questions and answers, please.
So I have a question for Mr. Wright, if you would come. So, first of all, I've had the opportunity to watch your buildings go up, quite a number of them, because you've built kind of in my neighborhood. So I appreciate your work. And one of the reasons that we are incentivizing this kind of development is because we really want single-family home ownership. And I know originally you talked about the possibility of rentals, and if you could just speak to that a little bit.
Yes. Well, my name's Sam Wright, obviously. Hello. So my business model previously was that we would build spec homes, and when they didn't sell, we would turn them into rentals and then subsequently either offer those up for owner financing later on or sell them outright. So if they do not sell immediately, then it allows us to carry on building, which I feel is more important. So with this project, I'm really looking to sell the houses. We already have enough rentals, but so I don't feel the need to develop a whole subdivision and keep all the houses again. So that's
okay.
That's my plan. Now, obviously, if a house doesn't sell straight away, then I will rent it and carry on building, which I feel is more important.
So we're trying to think of ways to, I totally believe you, and I'm glad you're building, and we're just trying to think of ways to help make sure that when we get into these, that they do, get into home ownership. And I know you can't guarantee it, and I know you need to have the building occupied, so you answered my question. Thank
Okay,
you.
Thank you.
Was there a time frame between building ready for occupancy and if you don't sell, then you will rent?
Typically, it would usually be about 3 months. At that point, the interest costs just make it prohibitive to keep on building. We've had pretty good luck doing it that way, where we've built homes, they've not sold immediately, and so we've rented them. And in some cases, we've actually sold them to the renters. They've decided that kind of like to buy the house then. So, and I haven't done any owner financing for that sort of thing, but I'm not opposed to considering to do that for this, if as long as we can make it work. So,
How long will it take you to build these 30 houses?
my plan is to build 6 a year once the infrastructure is done. So 5 years, really. We typically build about 10 to 12 houses a year. Most of them are much bigger than this. So this I don't feel is a stretch.
Adam, go ahead.
So just a couple of comments. The council's been in discussions of this and incentivizing, as Councilmember Ballinger stated, single-family homes and home ownership. I too have seen your work and appreciate the things that you've done for our city. Can you talk a little bit? Our discussion has led us to discuss taking sections of land that are underutilized or not developed. Tell us kind of your methodology for innovating in that way.
So far, all of the buildings that we've done have already been on an existing road, and so we've not had to do the development that this project is going to need. This is uncharted territory for me. I mean, really, I've never built a road or a cul-de-sac before, or done as much infrastructure as this. We've done commercial jobs that have required a lot more groundwork, but this is a whole new ball game. I don't currently have any vacant lots on any other streets that I could build houses on, and so this has been something that has been kind of ongoing for about the last 4 or 5 years since I purchased the lot back in, I think it was 2018 is when I actually bought that plot of land.
So one last question from me. This has been part of our discussion, but I want to make sure that it's discussed in open session. And were it not for us coming to a Chapter 380 agreement, would you be able to build this subdivision in the city limits? And what would it be cost prohibitive otherwise? I know that's kind of leading, but
it would be very difficult to do. It could be done, but it would stretch me to the point where we'd probably end up building one house every 6 months instead of 5 a year. So this just accelerates it. On the other hand, I don't know how long I would be able to carry the interest and payback costs on $1 million road that's not being used. I mean, that's kind of a lot to carry. So by helping me out, we get the road done quickly, and then it's really in my best interest to fill it up as quickly as possible and get the subdivision completed.
absolutely. Well, I know personally that I want to encourage the type of growth that you're wanting to do and the sort of development you're working on. So I think it's a great idea. Ready to support you.
Good. Thank you.
I'll just say, Sam, I've known you a long time, and you do very long time, and you do quality work, and I admire you. You're a businessman, and you don't have a crystal ball. None of us do, and there's risk involved. And this is what we need in this city is homes. And you and Mr. Crawford have stepped up, and his is a much bigger project than yours. But in your eyes and my eyes, this would be just as big as his. You know, it's your money and your risk, and I appreciate it because we do need new subdivisions in the city limits and not in Central Heights or Woden. So that's what builds a tax base.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Thank you.
I did need to make one clarification. Pam caught a mistake I'd made. The streets and drainage would be paid out of the Economic Development General Fund. I apologize, not out of the utility fund.
Okay, anybody got any more questions? Okay.
Mayor, I'll make a motion to approve the resolution creating a Chapter 380 Economic Development Program and authorizing an agreement by and between the City of Nacogdoches and Benefield Estates regarding the development of a residential subdivision with the noted change from Ms. Philpott.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next item.
Congratulations.
Consider an ordinance amending ordinance 1929-09-22, appropriating various amounts in accordance with budget adopted for ensuring fiscal year beginning October 1st, 2022 and ending September 30, 2023 in the amount of $184,700 for a Chapter 380 Economic Development Program with Benefield Estates LLC for the reimbursement and infrastructure costs associated with construction of a residential subdivision.
Mayor and council, this is just a budget amendment associated with the 380 that you just agreed to. That $184,700 is the amount that would come out of the general fund that funds the Economic Development Fund. The rest of the $240,000 would come out of the utility fund, and that's already budgeted.
Any public comment? If none, we'll have discussion on the council.
Do have one question. These, probably should have asked this earlier. These funds that we're adopting for a budget amendment, those are not expended until when?
They are expended upon issuance of a certificate of occupancy. So the house is built, it is finalized by the city inspections department, it goes on the tax roll that same year, and Mr. Wright files a report saying all of that and requesting his reimbursement, and then we write a check.
So this budget amendment ordinance is more a bookkeeping thing for this fiscal year.
Correct.
It's unlikely that we will expend anything in this fiscal year.
Correct. It's essentially to satisfy the auditors that we have the funding for the action you just took.
Excellent, thank you. That's all I had.
Did I do public comment?
You did.
Okay, all right. Okay, any other questions?
Just don't doubt yourself.
The motion that we approve the ordinance amending ordinance number as stated in item 10B. Thank you.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
And I know we should have said this in the discussion, but we keep talking about that crystal ball, and I know the auditor said he had one. Next time yeah, he said it was in his car. We shouldn't have let him get away.
Okay, next item is C, hold a discussion regarding the budget process, including proposed timeline frames for the budget process and the possibility of a task force to assist in the budget process. Mr. Kiplinger.
Mayor and Council, Keith Kiplinger, your city manager. Good evening. Dr. Bellinger, the accountant, our auditor, is at the Fredonia tonight, so if you want to go over there, Pam may know what he drives, and you can get that crystal ball.
Get a crystal ball?
That, you know, if we could get that, I think that would be magic. Dr. Bellinger asked that we put this on the agenda tonight, and I think that's fantastic because we do need to start talking about the 2024 budget process as we are in the middle of that. Just to give you an update, the departments are at about the 95% level with regard to putting their budgets together. We are doing something new this year, which is a peer review process. That is going on during the month of May. And so, like departments are meeting with one another to go through their budgets. And so the police chief is looking at the fire chief's budget, and the fire chief's looking at the public works budget. And it's not only those department directors that are doing that, but also our managers and supervisors. So this is partially a first opportunity for departments to look across the aisle at what their peers are doing in other city departments, but also an opportunity for us to build bandwidth and develop our young leaders to be the future leaders of the city. So through the month of May, those departments are having those meetings, and so Tommy Stanley in the Parks Department is going to be looking at what Carrie Walker's doing in the Street Department, and they're going through their budgets really line by line, trying to, number one, understand better what other people do and what the importance is, but also trying to take a pencil to that and say, hey, do you really need to spend that money, or are there opportunities for us to create efficiencies, or and maybe we can buy one tractor instead of two, and maybe we can share because we only need it 40% of the time. And so just having them take that deep dive at the supervisor, manager, and director level, I think is really important, and it's the first time we've done that. And so we're in the process of doing that. In early June, the finance director and I will meet with those directors and managers and go through their budgets again, which is a very typical process for the city manager and the finance director to do. And so we'll get back on track with regard to that. In the past, council has held workshops about 1,000 different ways. We have done it where the city manager presented the entire city budget. We've done it where the finance director presented the entire city budget. We've done it the last couple of years where each department came in and presented their budget and their wants and their needs. After a lot of discussion with Pam and the way that we're trying to reframe things this year and involve people across the city landscape, our proposal, and we're certainly, we'll take your direction and do what council desires, but our thought was to change the format of those workshops to be more focused on individual issues, not individual departments. And so to have a workshop, for example, the first one on personnel, and what are your goals and objectives with regard to our current staff, and what are the requested personnel additions or subtractions for the next year. The next one would be to have a workshop on capital needs. And again, these workshops wouldn't be only to talk about personnel or capital needs, but that would be the focus that staff would come prepared for, and then we would have the opportunity for discussion about anything else. And then a third workshop to talk about new projects and new programs, those proposed by staff and those that council thinks are important as we move forward. So I'll be happy to have answer any questions you may have, or have some conversation about where you would like to see the budget process go. We have an opportunity to do it the way that works best for you with a new council, and with your staff is willing to really take a hard look at the way you want to see the information, because it is an overwhelming amount of information. We don't have our dates yet from the state. That'll likely be at the end of May or the 1st of June. And then we'll back up from the dates that the state gives us, that the tax rate has to be set, when the budget has to be finalized, and all those things. We also won't really know revenue numbers until much later in the summer. So we want to go ahead and start having these workshops and having these discussions, knowing that we don't know property tax revenues until at least probably sometime in July. So.
Okay, we'll open it up for anybody have any public comment? If none, we'll take it back to the council and open it up for discussion, please. I've got one question. I think that in the House and the Senate, I think it's passed, it's on the governor's desk if he hadn't already signed it, to where they're issuing a higher homestead exemption, right? It went from like 40 to 70,000.
That's school.
Oh, that's just school? That's school only? Okay, all right, my fault, never mind. I don't want to talk.
Unless they've changed it
Okay.
since the last time.
I thought it was just Never mind then. I don't have a question. I don't want to talk about schools.
Well, I have a couple questions. So I was counting, we only have 7 meetings between now and September 12th, which I think is the date we have to adopt the budget. So I'm trying to get a gauge about when we are thinking about, is this July? I know we don't have all these things firmed up, but I think we can make some guesses about when we're going to, be needing these workshops and.
So what we would propose is having probably 2 workshops in the month of June, in addition to your regular meetings, and then possibly a 3rd workshop in the month of July.
And then I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. And at the end, will there be another workshop where everything is kind of put together that we would, or you see that in a meeting, a
So
regular
the
meeting?
charter requires that the city manager present a budget to the city council for you to look at. So we will put together a final proposed budget from staff, and then you can add, subtract, multiply, or divide as you see fit from that budget that we present. And so my anticipation would be that our final budget, and Pam is going to growl at me, but our final budget, as long as we have those revenue numbers solid, that our draft budget will be presented to you by the first few days of August, so that you do have time to go through the entire document over a 30 to 40-day period.
And then set the tax rate at September sometimes.
Yeah, so we don't know that, but theoretically, setting the tax rate somewhere around the first week of September, most likely, if it follows the tradition, and then the budget would finally be adopted probably your 2nd meeting in September. So.
And the 2 workshops in June and 1 in July, in addition to city council meetings.
Yes, so we could do them earlier in the day, so set a workshop at 3:30 and go into the council meeting at 5:30, or we could do those on an alternate day. It's certainly completely up to the will of the council, what you want to do with regard to that. And again, the number 3 workshops is really what Pam and I sat down and said, hey, we think that if we change the way we do it a little bit, and all the department heads are here to talk about their personnel, but maybe not make the presentations, just to try to do it a little differently, but we are completely open to whatever direction you want to go with regard to that. If you want 6 workshops, we'll do 6. If you want 1 workshop, we'll do 1. And we just tried to kind of take a look at what made sense to us.
So I don't mean to be the one keeping talking about this, but if we could keep in mind like what our current budget is, and then maybe within each of the workshops, say, this is gearing us towards where we are now, looks like it's going to be, if we do this part, it'll be a tax increase, or this will be savings. If we could get that in each piece, and I know we're back to, the auditor's crystal ball, but we just to give us a gauge so that we're not just looking at this project and this project and this project, and then at the end, I mean, y'all have a better guess than we will as you present it to us.
And we do. I do ask for a little bit of grace with all of our department heads, because they're when you talk about a crystal ball, they're working on budgets 18 to 20 months out, and so it's very difficult to identify the price of a pickup truck. 24 months ago was $35,000, and today it's $52,000. And so they're trying to predict. Again, we asked them to put their budget together a full 18 months before the end of the fiscal year that they're budgeting for. And so, but yes, we will. That's why we asked that if we do it in our format, that we're going to do personnel first. We know that we have some targeted areas that we need to address. Our dispatchers, we're having a really hard time recruiting and retaining dispatchers, and so we know that we need to address that. We also know that non-public safety employees did not receive, were not put into the STEP program, STEP pay plan, and also did not receive, really an across-the-board raise for those employees. And so we will bring some alternative scenarios, some options, along with kind of the cost, and then Pam should be able to give us some idea. Now, understand that because of the senior tax freeze that was put in place last year and the increased homestead exemption, we really in the past, we could sort of guess at where our tax number was gonna come in, but with that senior tax freeze, we know the number of properties that are owned by people over 65, but we don't know the value of those properties. So are those the properties that have a $50,000 appraised value, or are they the houses that have a $400,000 appraised value? So really, there's no way for us to get there until the appraisal district gives us that actual data, or at least an estimate. So, but we can certainly give you, you know, what do we think this looks like on the tax rate, or what do we think this, how much of this can we absorb? You know, we can try to do that.
Yeah, in the appraisal district, they don't, every year they do a percentage, I mean, up until like a 5-year time frame from, say, like this year's budget, and then they'll add 5% to appraisal districts. I mean, appraisal. They don't come out every year and just go through the process of identifying each property, right?
No. So they identify properties on a rolling basis. So yeah. So they may do a section of town or a certain group of properties at one time, but no, they don't typically do them constantly. The big unknown is the added the new construction value, which is new money, and that's where we really benefit. And so that's why projects like this 380 agreement tonight, if we can add new value, that's new money that we either have more opportunities to provide a higher level of service, or we have the opportunity to reduce the tax burden on the balance of the community.
So, go ahead. Whenever I want to talk about the task force or the little group before we finish too, so.
So I'm thinking about the preliminary valuations that we will get. Do we have any idea? Do we have a preliminary value now? I know some of the school districts in the county have received that.
We did. I can pull it up and see if I can find it pretty quickly. The issue that we have right now, he was able to give us our estimate by April 30th. That's another one of the state deadlines for them to provide that. I went back and looked at the April 30th we got last year and compared it to what it actually was, and it was just extremely different. It almost always is. Our issue now is not necessarily the value. We can assume that April 30th value is good. Our issue now is being able to pull out those values of those seniors. And we know that like 54% of our homesteads were in that freeze. The problem is the appraisal district has gone through a software conversion, and it has not gone as planned. And so they are having a very difficult time extracting that data. And so they're trying really hard. And Jason sent me a spreadsheet with a whole bunch of numbers and no column heading, and I haven't had a chance to go through it. It's his first attempt at it, but as far as being able to provide the actual certified, here's the values under the 65 freeze, he's not there yet. He's not sure how long it's going to take the software company to get that together. And so once we have that, we have a little bit better we have a peek into the crystal ball. We will not have some really hard numbers until late July. Right now, we're all just praying really hard that their software company can get that error fixed, because as soon as they can give us those numbers, then we can start that process. Right now, we're just kind of in a blind spot, because in the past, like Keith said, in the past, we can go every year and say, well, what happened last year and the year before and the year before? But this is a whole new year. We've never had the doubled exemption, and we've never had the freeze. And so we can't use past to predict future in this instance, because we don't know. 54% of our homesteads, does that equate to 75% of the value or 35% of the value? That makes a big difference on the tax rate. And so we really have got to get that data from the appraisal district, and then we'll be able to do a little bit more information for y'all. Right now, we're just kind of in the blind.
From a comparison standpoint on valuation, let's just say from the one you got this April compared to the one last April.
I want to say, let me see.
Did we gain valuation or lose valuation?
We gained, and we almost always do. It was not very much. I want to say 3%. I think it came from you, actually. the email. I want to say it was 3%, but it did not include any new construction. They didn't, that's another piece that they were not able to pull the software. They don't have any new construction value. And like you said, that's the piece that we're very interested in. And it fluctuates. Some years it's 3 million, some years it's 20 million. And so, at this point, we just don't have really, really good data, but I want to say it was like a 3% increase over what we actually, we were at last year. It was 2.1 billion value, taxable value was what last year was, and this was like 2.17, maybe 60 or 70 million dollars. It was, that's about what it was. I want to say about 3%.
Whenever you find it, if you'll just
Yeah, I can
send it to us.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, anybody got anything else, Kathleen?
Well, I'm ready to talk about this little group. I'm calling it a group now rather than a task force, rather than, because I spent some time talking with Pam this morning. I don't know if she was there. Okay. So several people have asked deeper questions than what this kind of audit looks at, which is our processes and making sure we do everything right. But some people are concerned about the 20% transfer or whatever our percentage is right now from the utility fund, and other people are wanting to look deeper into what exactly we're spending, detailed dollars on. And so I've had a lot of requests, and I think rather than people individually coming and asking for single items, I think it would be helpful to have a very, very small group of like accountants and people who are used to dealing with money actually come in and group their questions before they even came to Pam, but start right now even and work with us through the budget, and just attend, and think about the budget process, but also be able to look at some numbers that, I know this is really vague, but I'm trying to keep it vague so that we don't impose so much on staff time, but yet start to answer some of those questions. So
I guess I don't exactly understand. I know that we have very low participation in our budget meetings and our budget workshops, and so I would encourage those people to come and ask those questions. I don't really understand what a group of accountants would be looking at.
they
maybe?
look a little deeper into some of expenditures, and maybe they would ask questions, that, not being an accountant, I don't know exactly all those questions, but I can gather them and, from this little group. But I think that rather than one at a time, because they've asked different questions from me, what happens in here, and I don't want to pull out. I'm just thinking a small group of people who are concerned more deeply with the finances.
So are you
allow them.
thinking of establishing like a board or a commission that's appointed by council to do a deep dive into the budget? Is that?
We could. But we could step a little more lightly to start out with, if that helps.
Well, I'm just struggling to get my head kind of all the way around this. My professional suggestion would be that if you're going to do that, we would want to establish it like a board or commission, like we've typically done, that they would have some clearly established goals, parameters within which they work, and exactly what their job is. Our charter is silent on that. It says the city manager provides the council a budget, and the council decides ultimately what to fund within that budget. And so, we're certainly open to letting anybody that wants to look at expenditures can look at any expenditure, but I'm just not really sure how we would manage that, and if we didn't have sort of a system in place.
So I'm just throwing this out to in an open meeting to hear what the rest of my colleagues think and what you think. Sure. But I'm perfectly willing to go and get details, along with you if you would like, about what a board or a commission would look like and what their job would be and what they would. I'm happy to present that more formally if you all are interested in that kind of thing.
Can I ask one question on top of that? Okay, do we have an internal auditor in the city?
An internal auditor? No.
Okay, like the county does, right?
The county has, yes, an internal auditor. Their system is set up differently, but we have annually have that outside audit firm comes in and produces that audit that you would receive tonight.
Okay, all right, okay. All right. Kathleen, do you want to?
And one of the recommendations that they might make is, you know, an internal auditor, or they might say every once in a while do a really deeper dive audit. I'm not sure what, you know, what recommendations they'd make. I'd almost rather have them in place, you know, as professionals before. So,
Well, I know that I was obviously pretty overwhelmed looking at the budget thing. And I would love to have a little extra help, different eyes, a new perspective on things. So that set of people would help me, I know.
well,
So my approach on thinking about all this, because we need to be extremely careful with the amount of time, at least initially, that we're discussing. You know, we're in the heat of a budget cycle,
Right.
so throwing a huge formal thing at our finance department, that seems like something big to chew on right now. But to have, maybe if it's even informal now, my approach is we need to make sure that we're building trust in everything that we do. So we've discussed capital needs from a community standpoint. We have the council as the set of decision makers, we have the staff that make recommendations, and then we have an additional layer of public oversight. And so just building, not to become burdensome, because if it's that, I think that's a problem. But to have, you know, if you have, let's use the capital needs as an example. You've got 20 people that are discussing these needs, and they've all heard the same story about what's actually going on. So when someone says to them, you know, why is the city doing this? You now have 20 more people that can tell that story and tell it from an educated standpoint. I think that's where I come from on this idea. But I think we have to be careful with the timing on it, because we're 3 months from an adoption of a budget. But I think we need to be able to answer some deep questions, not just for the public, but for ourselves as we make decisions on adopting a budget and tax rate. Because ultimately, we're accountable to the public for spending their dollars, and the staff is too.
And I would very much recommend that if you want to move forward with some kind of a board or commission, and it's in a permanent or semi-permanent manner, that's something that we would start October 1, to give staff the opportunity to get those folks up to speed before we get knee-deep in the budget process. Now, with regard to what you want to do today in the interim period, I think that gives us some time if you wanted to establish a financial advisory committee or whatever you wanted to call it. It certainly would be something that would give us some time to put that together and see what does that look like. And then council could make those appointments just like you do for planning and zoning or any of the other advisory committees that you have. And that would be easy. So to that point, though, anybody that has questions, our records are open. We're happy to provide those records. We're as transparent as we possibly can be with regard to that. So,
Keith, I don't think anybody, especially Kathleen or anybody on this council, is throwing a stone at anybody. It's just that people come to us and they say, well, what about this? What about this? Well, we don't know. I don't know. You know, I just got here. You know, I'll find out. But I think you may be on a right track. You know, I don't know what an internal auditor does for the county. I'm trying to help you, Pam. You know, would an internal auditor in-house help Pam?
she'll always take more help.
Well, a lot of times, it's the minor issues that internal audit does, like vouchers. You know, you submitting your vouchers on time, et cetera, and all of that. Minor purchases. Now, the external auditor, if the internal audit is not doing something different than what the external audit doing, then it's not cost effective to have it's going to cost you, if you have a minor task force, it's going to cost you, whether it's time of the team, somehow it's going to cost you. And is that cost effective?
And I think ultimately that's for council to make that decision, but I can tell you that starting now, Pam's work expectations are 60 or 70 hours a week until we get this budget nailed. And I'm not gonna say that I have that expectation of her, but I know that she has that expectation of herself. Because I've lived with her for 16 budget cycles now, and I can tell you exactly how she operates. So anything we add is adding on to that.
So one of the questions I'd expect this financial advisory committee or task force or whatever we call it to answer is whether they would recommend an internal auditor, whether they'd recommend another kind of audit or anything like that. It's beyond me. Are there benefits, and maybe this is a question for Pam, or you, but are there benefits to having them start now just a little bit so they're involved with the budget? And maybe ask a couple of deeper questions now. Do you see any benefit to that?
I encourage everybody that lives in Nacogdoches that has an interest in our budget to come to budget workshops and budget meetings and ask questions. And if we don't have answers that day, we'll provide the answer.
So the difference to me of having a group is they can sit down together and hash things out among themselves first to decide, wait a minute, is this our question or is this our question? And what data we'll get it, because they come from different areas, but still in the financial realm, it forms a better question. So it's just not individuals, because I can ask an individual question, or I can ask, but when you get a particularly a very small group of people who are competent in that area, you have a higher quality, and it may reduce the amount of time that our staff spends gathering information. So here's the question: if it's, I can wait, but I think, especially after we were talking today, there might be some value in having them start a little bit, knowing that they don't want to get involved in the middle of when you're working 80 hours a week, but it helps get them informed and helps get them involved in the budgeting cycle.
So would this group be a group that applies for a position and is interviewed by the council like the other boards and commissions?
So I'm seeing that it would be a group that we would nominate and select based on their skills.
Okay.
So collaboratively, we would all, I don't know that we need, each council member picking one person, but we could collaborate on it, and that's all, in a very small group.
So one thing, and thank you, Jan. One thing to think about is if the council appoints that group, they likely fall under the open meetings rules, and we would have to post their meetings, and those would be public meetings, so they couldn't just get together in a small group and have a discussion because they were appointed by the city council as an advisory board. And
I'm not sure if that's true, so. Right.
The last time you created a board, you mandated that it follows the Open Meetings Act. Advisory boards that do not have final decision-making power do not fall under the Open Meetings Act. Unless...
No, but we'll just keep it there, because it's just
No,
an
if it
advisory.
becomes, if you are rubber stamping what the advisory board is doing, then they will fall under it, but that becomes a fact question, so. Advisory boards don't fall under the Open Meetings Act.
Okay, so it's, I can make a motion that we do this, or we can, I'd just like to know, I don't know, what do y'all think? Do you want it now? Do you want to start off small? Do you want to me to work on it and bring it back? Do you are absolutely certain you don't want that group to form until October 1st? Or I think there's some value in it, particularly if they know, you know, to be.
So,
Pam, we were talking about it. Did you want to speak to that?
I can. This is me as Pam and not the finance director. I would say this is very much something that needs to be done correctly from the beginning, because there's nothing worse than creating a committee with no real direction and not getting where you want to go. With the idea that there are a handful of folks that have these questions, if it was me, I would suggest that handful of people ask for whatever data they need. They have their little meetings and they come to these board budget workshops and they ask their questions. And then we can build that committee, a formal committee next year if we like how this goes. But those 2 or 3 people that have those questions, there's nothing stopping them from calling me tomorrow and saying, hey, I want your detailed budget for every department, and I'm going to shoot it right to them. And they sit down and they formulate their questions, and they come to the open meeting and they have those questions. And that is yes, it can start right now without us actually having created a committee, because those 3 people are very much involved and want to do that. And that's a way to start it without it being a formalized, we're going to have an advisory committee, we're going to have this. We can start it that way with anybody in town can sit down and say, hey, Pam, send me your detail. I want to ask some questions this year, because I've told y'all all, it's much better if people come and ask questions while we're doing this than later on after, well, why did y'all do that? And so I will answer any question. This, I think, just starts that process. There are interested people that want to know more. I think that's great. Get them together, get their information, and then they come to the meetings and they present their concerns and their questions and all that good stuff. And we start that process. And then maybe after October, if there's a formal set that y'all want to do and do 3, 5, 7, whatever, then you can do that. And that's just my opinion.
And just to clarify, I think there are a lot of people with questions, but they would, if we put it into a smaller group, the smaller group could answer for a lot of other people. So, go.
I feel like if we had, if we come back, if it's our next regular meeting or whenever, and discuss how we want to proceed with this long term, whether it starts in October or sooner, where we have the charge that we want a group of people to do, where we have very specific things if we formalize it. But I think having it informal to begin with makes a little sense, so we can maybe see what works. And if the pathway that they choose as a group is getting the answers that are beneficial to that group, not just whoever's interested, but also beneficial to the council. Because I think in addition to the oversight that we want, we also want us to become better informed to make better decisions.
Right.
And so that's kind of what I think. I think maybe even bring it back up for discussion at our next meeting in May or the first one in June.
Or I may just, what do you think about if I just encourage this small group of people to be an informal, and then they can do what you're saying and then gather their questions and follow the budget process?
Any citizen in town can do
Right,
that. And
right,
we
I know.
encourage them to participate. That's one thing that we've always talked about. We have these budget meetings and no one participates. And that's their voice. And so I think it's a great idea. It's just, I think it's a good way to start it. Because I will tell y'all, when you've asked for the detailed budget, it's thousands and thousands of lines, and you can get very overwhelmed very quickly. And so you kind of have to have an idea, are we looking at how much we spend on pens? Or are we looking at how much we spend on vehicles? And so at some point, everybody has to take a look at it. What are we really digging in and looking at? And that's going to take some time. And I think it's a good place to start with people that are very interested and have a background. And then maybe that spurs other people to want to know.
Well, I really appreciate this discussion. This is very, very helpful to me, and to hear the other council members and to hear you all. So I really appreciate that, and I think I know what I'll do, and then to help informally start something, and then also to when everybody's doesn't have the budget gun aimed at them, you know, how to, how to actually look at a financial advisory committee and see which ones exist in other areas and do a little research.
I think what
Like
Pam
it.
said, and I think you agree, just
Yeah.
start it like this.
Right.
And,
Like it.
and then see what happens from there, and
Right.
if it gets
Good.
too cumbersome, we'll just forget it. If it's not, we'll form a, whatever,
Financial advisory committee or whatever.
like a ZBA or something like
Okay.
that. So, okay,
Thank you.
all right.
We don't need a motion or anything on
No,
that.
that's just discussion. Okay, let's see.
Communications.
Now we're on item D, receive an update and hold a discussion regarding the city communications task force and the process for providing information both in emergencies and not emergencies. This is Mrs. Sal.
Mayor, Council, Jessica Sal, Community Services Assistant Director. I'll try to go through this concisely because I don't know about y'all, but it's past my bedtime. A little tired.
You don't know.
I usually have my contacts out
You
at least by
don't
now. Per Councilmember Ballinger's request, I'm going to talk about city communication, what our current standard operating procedures are, and then a bit of an update on the communications task force. So the city of Nacogdoches, we communicate in multiple different ways, mainly because people take in media and news in multiple different ways. So we kind of throw everything against the wall because hopefully people will hear a message if we put it on Facebook and Twitter and the website, things of that nature. So the way we communicate mainly, we have several different channels. We have our social medias, Facebook, Instagram, Nextdoor. We recently relaunched our Twitter account because that's what the kids are doing, I guess. We are also developing and implementing a social media calendar, so that way it's not just when we see information, we actually have a strategic approach to when information's posted about upcoming meetings, about beautification projects, anything like that in town. So we have an actual calendar on that. We also have media partners, local newspaper, TV, radio, Channel 21, which the city administers. We are in the process of updating that content, so that way you can see not only recorded council meetings, but also advertisements on upcoming city programs, community programs, and anything else that the community may be interested in. And then we are reworking our city email list. We have a very, very old one that's our old constant contact information, so we can start sending emails out to the citizens when there's a monthly list of meetings coming up or anything else of note. And then also during our emergencies, we use our NACWISE alert system. We follow our incident command structure, and then we use kind of all the methods I already listed in cooperation with our county partners. We have a very good relationship with Abby Scorsanelli, who is our PIO partner over at the county. So depending on the type of emergency, the severity, the length of it, we partner with the county to do those things as well. As far as the communication task force goes, I last gave an update to council in November of '22. And since we have some new faces, I'll kind of go over some of the stuff that they've already completed, what we've done since November, and kind of our next steps. So the communication task force was a big help in our conversion from Blackboard Connect to HyperReach, which is our back end of the NACWISE alert system. It was a huge improvement because now we are partners with the county. So we not only notify citizens in the city limits, but we can also notify the county, and both at the same time. They also assisted with the City of Nacogdoches website redesign. You'll see when you go to the website now, we kind of have our hub page where you can go to either city, county, NISD, SFA, and several other partners. So that way it's more of a cohesive, when you're looking for the city, we can help you with anything. They also receive presentations from multiple city divisions, from police and fire, public works, Michael Donnell over in IT, to learn about how we communicate, who they're talking to, and kind of see what our standard operating procedures were. And then they also reviewed the old city communication plan. It was a document that was never formally adopted by city council, but was what we had used for 2 or 3 years before that. When I did present in November, this communication task force was in the middle of doing interviews for city staff. We split city staff up into 2 groups, did kind of a group discussion, and in my personal opinion, not speaking for the task force, it was very beneficial. There's things where police and fire got together with the task force, answered questions about NACWISE, about what we could do better, and it was really beneficial because we were just talking to each other and kind of brainstorming. We had done one of those when I presented in November. We completed that second one. And now the Communication Task Force is on to conducting interviews with city partners. They wanted to talk to people like NISD, SFA, the Chamber of Commerce, and anybody that we regularly communicate with to kind of assess how we're doing. What information they get from the city, what communication they use. We also asked them if they had emergency operations plans and asked if we could have a copy of those. So that way, if we have an emergency, we can look and see what they are doing as well. Excuse me. So currently, they've identified about 19 different partners, and 8 of those interviews have been completed, and those are still ongoing. The plan the task force came up with was next to do a survey, just a general communication survey, trying to gauge where the community hears from the city. You know, if they are, you know, under 25, they may not be getting anything on Facebook, because apparently that's where the older people go to now. And they told us the other day, they're like, no, we're all on TikTok, which I'm not going to do. So trying to figure out where they hear from the city, what information they get, what information they'd rather get, how often they want to hear from us, and kind of gauge how we're doing. Once that is done, their plan is to then come up with a communication task force, final report, findings, and then recommendations. Since I don't have that crystal ball we all keep talking about tonight, I can't tell you what those findings are going to be, but we think with this method approach we've used that we'll have a good report at the end, because we'll have information from our community partners, from the citizens in Nacogdoches, and then also from city staff kind of brainstorming how we can all do better. Also, since that November meeting on the staff on the back end, we've also done some improvements. We've recreated our NACWISE and NAC 311 flyer. It's now a combined flyer. It's English on one side, Spanish on the other. It's very cut and dry, which is not normally how I like to design things, but it's very step-by-step. Here's how you sign up for NACWISE. Here's how you use the NAC 311 system. We've also started doing various outreach events. The library did a how-to festival about a month ago, and we did a whole booth on here's how you sign up for NACWISE, and here's how you use NAC 311. That was pretty popular. We've also hired our city public information officer, Kevin Myers, here in the back. He started in March 2023, so he's been here a grand total of 2 months. So we're slowly getting him onboarded. He has been meeting with city staff to figure out what they communicate to the public, what their standard operating procedures are, to figure out where we're at, and then start making recommendations from there. He's also been busy touching base with local media partners to make sure, you know, at KTRE we have the right person to talk to send our press releases to, and then the best way to get information out to them, whether we're advertising or we're having an emergency. So that's what we are currently doing, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. And also, I do have copies of the NACWISE NAC 311 flyer if anyone wants to take one home with them. They travel in my car now.
Okay, do we have any public comment on this item? If not, we'll take it to the council for discussion.
Can I go first so I don't
Sure.
forget my question? Can you send us a digital copy of the flyer?
Absolutely.
That's the first thing. So with regard to the communications that we do that we use with HyperReach, with NACWISE. So when we had the flood last week, I received a number of NACWISE alerts, but I didn't receive any alerts until 9:15, 9:30 in the morning. So I've discussed this with Mr. Meyer and with Brian Bray about how do we determine when we actually send those alerts out, because this is anecdotally for my own benefit. I want to know when we have road closures so I know not to go a certain route. I want to know where there are traffic lights out. I want to know where there are trees across roadways. I want to know where there are dangers for traveling. That seems like an emergency to me, and it felt to me, and I know that the weather alerts are automated.
They are.
And so I'm guessing it's a manual method that we're using if we have to send one out that's not related to weather?
Yes, so there are certain weather events that do trigger that automatic weather alert as long as you've opted into that. Because the NACWISE alert system, it's set up to where if you just want boil water notices, things in your specific tiny area, then you're only going to get those. If you are signed in for weather alerts, those are triggered by the National Weather Service if there is a tornado warning in your area. Things like the flood the other day, that was sent out manually. So once our staff gets in the office, is aware that there's something going on, Then Kevin had to immediately write up a NACWISE alert, go up to IT, record it, and send it out to, we did a all call, so everyone who was signed up got that call, rather than geofencing a certain area.
And that really gets to my point, because we need to decide collectively as a community of staff and a council, when are we going to send out alerts? Because I know there's been discussion about we don't want to send out too many because then people will opt out and then we have those issues. But we had a situation where we had what I've been told was a historic flood, and the waters were still rising after sunrise, but they were already high by that point. And it feels like that's a point, and the city manager may want to weigh in on this, that it's time to call people in and say, we've got to let people know as they're starting their day, because when Main Street is closed as people are traveling to work, when anything's closed, people need to have the best information available, and you shouldn't have to go to social media to find it. It should be given to you, much in the way a tornado warning would be. And so that's kind of question point statement. And then on the other side, thinking of the communication task force, what has that task force's participation and attendance looked like? It seems like now I compare everything to the Capital Needs Committee, where you have a huge number of people and everyone shows up every time. So what does the communication task force attendance look like?
Well, I do have a copy of it. I'm happy to send the attendance sheet to y'all. It's been a little spotty, and I don't mean to speak ill of anybody or any of their efforts, because everyone is very busy and people have dedicated their time to this task force, which I greatly appreciate. The communication task force has suffered a little bit with some staff turnover, which has led to a few hiccups here and there. We have had 2 people that have dropped off. We lost Mr. Mall since he got elected, and so now our task force is down 3 people. We have had some low attendance numbers, and we've had quite a few people. Since I presented in November, we've had 7 meetings scheduled because we rescheduled a few, and we've only been able, excuse me, to host 2 of those meetings, either because I had so many people reach out and say, we're not coming today, and I was going to have a meeting with 2 people, or everyone had reached out and said, we were going to do our interviews, but we weren't able to. The person I'm interviewing wasn't there, and it wasn't a good use of their time to have everyone come in for a meeting if that's all they were going to discuss, was that wasn't, the task wasn't done. So we've had a little bit of an issue with attendance. That has been a problem.
So I know I feel like I'm monopolizing the time, and I know everyone's ready to go home, but thinking about the recourse for people who have had damage from this flood, I know that it's been posted on social media how they can go to the Department of Emergency Management's form and fill that out. I don't know if NACWISE is the way to do that to make sure that everybody that is opted in gets it, but if that is an available means and we can send that as a non-emergency, it seems like that would be a way to help people that don't know about it get there. Just my thoughts from living in this world in a school setting where we send out notices regularly. It's not 35,000 people or 60,000 in the county, but it's having a way to think of when you're going to send things out and what important information do people need. And Mr. Meyer and I have discussed that in general terms, and I just want to make sure that I make that public, that we're trying to improve our communications, and I know our staff is committed to that. And I want to do everything I can to help and get more people opted in and get the word out to people.
Absolutely, and that is something the task force I know discussed early on, and I do anticipate that being kind of their final report, is kind of a recommendation on what is an emergency, how often is it okay to send information like the reimbursement form and link that's not an emergency, but everyone does need to know about it. Right. So they have discussed that a little bit, and I do anticipate that being in the final report. I just don't know what those recommendations will be.
And so on that same line, I want us to err on the side of oversharing until we have that recommendation, because now we're undersharing.
Okay.
And I want us to over communicate for the time being.
Yes, sir.
If it's the agreement of the rest of the balance.
Okay, anybody else? Kathleen?
I have real specific.
Okay.
I asked for this item to be put on the agenda prior to the flooding because we had those either windstorms or tornadoes, and I had several calls because I have pushed this NACWISE alert system, and I had a very detailed email. What on earth is the NACWISE alert system for if I don't get, notices that we have trees down and, all kinds of things? So so I'm just saying, and you don't have to respond to it or anything, I'm just saying, up the communications, because these are people who are not on Facebook and not on, Nextdoor or not on, so.
No, I appreciate that. We did do a presentation to the council several months ago, and our staff take at the time, and we can certainly revisit that, and we're open to that. Our staff take at the time was that in an emergency event that someone needed to take a direct action, lock your door, close your windows, avoid the area. In an emergent situation, we would use the NACWISE alert system. And so those people that needed to take direct action could have been notified that way, or it could have been a firefighter pounding on their door, because that was the most expeditious way to get that out. So we can certainly change that parameter, but the windstorm that you're talking about, those straight line winds, didn't require people to take emergent direct action, like there's an active shooter in the neighborhood.
Well, I think they felt it did because there were so many trees down and just to be alerted to the situation. So it's just something to consider, but that's where I first asked. People wanted to be notified on that. So you can take that in, that's when I first started getting them. And then also an alert when the thing is over. So, and immediately I had some people say I would have changed, it would have changed the damage I'd had if I'd known at 6 a.m. because I ran into the waters or whatever. So I'm just saying, I agree, err on the side of over-communicating versus under-communicating.
We can do that. I turned off my Amber Alerts because I don't like seeing when somebody gets kidnapped in El Paso. So we just have to find where is that happy medium. And if council wants us to over-communicate, we can do that.
And then the other point, and the other thing I would like to, and I'm the one who first suggested the communications task force, and the timeline was like 6 to 9 months, at the most a year, when they would get a report back, and it's been 2 years. So I suggest that we put a deadline on the report, either the last meeting in June or the first council meeting in July. And let's wrap this thing up.
I would be happy to do that, because our staff assessment was to try to have it done sometime this summer, depending on attendance, but we can definitely speed that up if council.
I think that'll help your attendance. If they know this is when it's gonna be done, let's get it done. So less time, those are my two. I would also like to see Channel 21 used, because I'm really tired of watching that, what is that?
The Lone Star
Yeah, the
Legislative
Lone Star
Conference
Legislative
from
Conference.
2018.
That riveting information.
Right, so
Yes.
anyway, if we could put some other stuff, some council meetings or whatever while you're doing it, because people, I didn't know people were addicted to that channel before, You are, you're addicted?
I love that channel.
Okay, well, anyway, so if we could do something, those are my 3 points, that's it for me.
On emergencies, the information you receive that it's an emergency, is there a verification time? I mean, do someone verify that information before it goes out on airways?
As far as like copy editing the text that's written, or verifying that it is emergency?
Verifying that it is an emergency.
Yes, so the information we sit on NACWISE, either it's an automated alert from the National Weather Service that automatically runs, or things like the flood information, we got that from our incident command staff. So at that time was Fire Chief Brown and Steve Bartlett, who was our interim city manager while Mr. Kiplinger was out of town. And so they are verifying with multiple sources to make sure the information we're putting out there is correct. So I don't create the information. Mr. Meyer does not create the information. We get it from our incident command, wordsmith it a little bit to make sure it flows. And also with NACWISE, we do have word limits we have to put on there. And so we do that, but we get that information from higher ups.
So if I call one in, you would say?
I would double check it.
Thank you.
No, I'm just kidding. I would trust you completely.
I really appreciate all the work you all have done. This is trying to sort through, because we get the other, just like you get, complaints, we get, questions. Wait a minute, you made this whole community sign up on an Aquise alert and we didn't get one. What happened? So thank you for your work on it.
Thank you very much.
Any more discussion? Okay, that was just an information item.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica, very much. And the last item on the agenda is Jan. Hold discussion and give staff direction regarding 2023 City Council meeting and dates.
Mayor and Council, Jan Vinson, City Secretary. I'm going to try to remember to flip my slides this time. So, Councilmember Bellinger had requested that I review some information that we did back in November of 2022. City Council approved a set of meeting dates by resolution. Council meets the first and third Tuesday of each month. That is just our normal set meetings. If we go off of those set meetings or have extra meetings, we're supposed to do those by resolution per the Code of Ordinance, which we did in November 1st of 2022. And some of the changes that we made are on this next slide. We rescheduled the January 3rd, 2023 meeting to January the 10th because that was real close to our New Year's holiday. We have rescheduled the July 4th meeting to July the 11th. Because that is a staff holiday. Budget meeting, tax rate adoption is required by law on September the 12th. We added that. We rescheduled the October the 3rd, 2023 meeting to October the 10th because October the 3rd is the National Night Out and we didn't want to interfere with what our public safety officers do for National Night Out. And then the third Tuesday meetings in November and December were canceled due to our city staff holidays falling on those dates. If you choose to make any changes to what we've set up here, then we'll have to do another resolution. I'd have to come back with that, and we would have to approve that. And then another thing that I wanted to talk about just a little bit is special meetings. If a special meeting is called, Section 12 of the charter states that the chairman, which is the mayor, or 3 council members may call a special meeting of the city council at any time deemed advisable. We would need 72 hours to post that special meeting, and that's how we call those.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Jan. Okay, I want to start this. I would like to propose a special meeting one day next week. And I'll poll the council on what would be a good date. We can start with Monday. And it would be primarily or specifically for starting discussion about the hiring of a new city manager.
Okay.
And I've asked Benita to help us with that meeting. She's the Human Resources Director. And so, do you have?
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but that would be the only item on the meeting, on the special meeting would be the executive session to discuss that, correct?
Right this minute, yes. But if we get past 72 hours, it won't be. But as of right now, that's what it would be. Sure. Yes.
Monday works for me.
Okay. Good. I'm okay. What about you, Mr. Bolden?
What time? Because I have scholarships to give out on Monday.
Okay. During the day?
Yeah, at both Sherino and Martinsville, so.
Is it at day?
It'll be any time.
So the one at Martinsville starts at 7.
7?
That's,
Okay.
I know a little bit about that.
Okay. So 5:30, if we started at normal 5:30?
Or early?
I'm fine with 4:30. That's about the earliest I can get here.
4:30 would be okay with me.
4:30 sounds good to me.
4:30 be okay with you,
Surely,
Brad? Okay.
surely we can finish it in
It's a
4
great
hours?
idea.
Yeah, sure. Okay, we'll set that up, please, for executive session for that one item right now.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, we'll get that posted.
Okay. Now,
Mayor, who do you want at that meeting?
really, I think all we need is Jan's going to be out of town. We'll need a secretary,
Well,
Rhonda.
Can Benita fill that role?
Well, or
Ms.
Rhonda,
Hall?
Rhonda,
Yeah.
Rhonda
Rhonda
can do
can.
it. She needs to get
Okay.
used to it anyway,
She
so.
does. All
Rhonda and Benita would be all we need, you know. I talked to her today. She's fine. So,
We'll get it posted tomorrow.
okay,
There's no reason why we can't get it posted tomorrow.
okay, all right.
Any other questions about that? Because I have one other thing I'd like to look at real quick, if
No,
it's okay.
And I'm sorry to interrupt you
No,
if I
you're
did.
perfectly fine. So one of the things that I wanted to show real quick is, Michael's gonna help me out. So recently, we post our agendas through something called Civic Clerk, which is our agenda management software. I have a different view, staff has a different view than what the citizens can see. So recently, they did a little bit of an upgrade on the forward-facing part that the citizens see. So we wanted to run through that just really quick so that you can see how to get what you need, and the citizens can see how to get what they need when they go to this website. So this is our city page. And so can you click for me, Michael? If you go to your government and then to city council, and then scroll down a little bit and you can do regular agenda. So this is what you're gonna see. Scroll down just a little bit. You can click on where it says May the 16th, the big gray box. And it's gonna take you to this screen, which looks a little weird. You can click on agenda and you get just the agenda. If you click on agenda packet, you get, for this agenda was hundreds of pages.
400 and something.
So if you click on meeting overview to the top left, that is what you see. You can scroll down to each item and only click on the attachment that you want to see. And so when they did that upgrade, it was a little hard to find this spot. So we just wanted to show you what that looks like, and the public can also see that and get what they need really quick.
So the download button on there doesn't, what do you use it for?
If you use the agenda packet download button right there, it's gonna bring all of the pages up. So you have to scroll through every single page to find what you're looking for. If you do the meeting overview, you can just go to the agenda item you wanna see and click on the one attachment you really wanna look at, rather than scrolling through hundreds of pages to get to what you need.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
And when she showed me that this morning, I thought, oh, everybody's got to see that, because I have been just killing myself. Thank you, but I have one other thing I
You
have to
go right
bring up.
ahead, I'm ready for you.
Okay, it's not for
I'm
you.
too tired to get nervous.
I just forgot, I just wanted to say, sometimes we don't have a full quorum if people are, or sometimes there's something that you want a full complement of the city council, but I will not be here June 6th. So you can have fun without me. My flight got rescheduled from overseas, and we won't get into the United States into Dallas until like 9 o'clock, so I won't be here, so.
That's on what day?
June 6th.
Okay. Does anybody else have any conflicts the rest of the year?
I can't speak to any at this time, and my wife has already resigned herself that she will spend our anniversary watching me on TV on June 6th.
Is that June 6th? Oh, that's your anniversary?
It is, so.
Sorry. Would you rather,
Keep it light.
would you rather change it? I mean, it doesn't make any difference to me. We could do
No,
it.
that's all right.
We could have two meetings. We could go the 13th and the
On the 20th,
and the 20th.
cancel June 6th.
Yeah.
Don't make any difference.
I'd rather have everybody here. I know it's gonna be impossible sometimes, but,
Yeah, don't leave me alone.
yeah.
So we'd have to. He could
Yeah,
call.
you need to do a resolution for that.
Well, could the mayor, since he equals 3 council members, Could
mayor
he?
would call a special meeting, but he can't call the regular meeting, and he can't cancel the regular meeting. You'll have to do that by vote of resolution. Which, I mean, you can do that. We don't have one prepared for you. It is on the agenda tonight, so you could describe it.
Yeah, I could prepare it and bring it for signature if you just.
If you
Okay.
just want to, so you could cancel the 6th.
I make the motion that we cancel the regularly scheduled council meeting on June 6th and that we also add the council meeting on June 13th at the regularly scheduled time.
I will second that and get out of the doghouse.
Kendra owes me one.
On June 13th, you will, well, no, I'll just remote in. Yeah, never mind.
Okay, so did we just do a resolution?
But no, you have to vote.
Oh, we just did.
Oh, do we all vote?
Yeah, okay.
Motion and a
No.
second.
Yeah,
We
wait
have a
minute.
motion second.
We
All
got a
in
motion
favor?
and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign.
I will prepare that resolution and I will come see you tomorrow.
Okay, all right. Or I'll come get it if you, I'm just right around the corner.
Yeah, I have a couple things I'll need to
Okay,
get you to
all right.
sign all on them over.
Okay,
Thank you.
okay. Anybody else have any questions or anything?
You did
Okay,
a great
okay.
job, Mayor.
Okay, we are about to adjourn this meeting, and if you want to blame anybody, it's me. It's my fault. I am a worker. I don't want to spend all night in a meeting, but Keith said, well, we're going to make this first meeting real light, and we're going to just, I said, no, just load it up. We got a lot of work to do, and I'm a worker, and I think everybody on this council is a worker. This is a long meeting. I don't think going forward, some of them will probably be this long, but we'll try to get you out of here as soon as we can. But we did accomplish some things tonight. I thank everybody for coming and participating in their local government. As of right now, God bless this great city of Nacogdoches, Texas. This meeting's adjourned.